It all started in the most dangerous place in the world, the Broken World Tree, situated at the center of the world. There, our protagonist named Rimuru walked into a mysterious store, and once the merchant saw Rimuru, he greeted him warmly. However, Rimuru quickly dismissed the formalities and told the man that he wasn't there for ordinary goods, but had come to purchase what was hidden at the back of his store. Noticing how desperate Rimuru appeared, the merchant agreed and guided him to the back of his store. There, the merchant revealed his most prized possessions, a group of girl slaves. Among them, one particular girl with a horn and a dragon-skinned hand captured Rimuru's attention. Wasting no time, Rimuru immediately said he would purchase her. With the transaction concluded, the merchant yanked the girl forward by the chains on her neck like she was a dog, and then informed Rimuru that he had rewritten the contract on her collar, officially making her his slave. That settled, Rimuru asked the girl for her name, but the girl replied that she didn't know, prompting the merchant to interject and explain to Rimuru that the girl had lost her memories before being sold to him. Rimuru then decided to name the girl Ire after the water goddess, and then left the store immediately with her. On getting to the inn where Rimuru stayed, Rimuru disclosed to Ire that he possessed a gift that allowed him to see other people's abilities, and then he revealed to Ire that he had identified 3 gifts within her. In this world, gifts were essentially magical talents bestowed upon humans by the gods. So, when Rimuru told Ire that he saw in her the gifts of dimensional storage, acrobatics, and mana bestowal, Ire interrupted, admitting that she only knew of her dimensional storage since she couldn't recall anything from her life before enslavement. Additionally, Ire sadly confessed that she had once been a normal human before becoming the monster she was now. Rimuru then asked if she had anything stashed in her dimensional storage, to which Ire answered that she couldn't remember storing anything but could sense the last item placed there. Ire pulled out a pile of junk from her dimensional storage and then described them as old items brimming with mana. But upon seeing the items, Rimuru was surprised that Ire didn't recognize just how valuable they were. Putting that aside, Rimuru explained to Ire that he had no fighting skills and then revealed that her job would be to fight in his place as his bodyguard. So very early the next day, Rimuru and Ire set out for the market. On the way, Ire asked to know why Rimuru even needed a bodyguard like he was some drug lord. Rimuru then explained that his mission was to travel to the dangerous city of Raum to enroll in the Magic Academy. Suddenly, while they talked, 3 ugly thugs ambushed them, demanding all their cash. Immediately one of the hoodlums noticed Ire was a slave girl. He insisted they have some deep fun with her. But at that moment, Rimuru whispered to Ire that this was the perfect chance to prove herself, adding that with his healing, their team was solid. Still, Rimuru cautioned that they were outnumbered and advised that the best strategy was to take out the 2 fools in front first, leaving the one at the back for last. One clueless goon then walked toward Ire and then grabbed her shoulder to cop a feel of her body. But before he could blink, Ire twisted his arm and ferociously smashed his useless head into the ground. Seeing his comrade attacked, the other goon at the front charged at Ire in rage, only for Ire to redesign his face with her knee, sending him crashing down. Next, the last thug with his thumb-shaped head swung his blade, but Ire, unrelenting, caught it with her dragon hand and shattered it into pieces. Terrified, the egghead froze, but before he could react, Ire Sparta kicked him out of existence. Just then, a hidden thug attempted a sneak attack from behind, only to be too slow as Ire seized his head with her dragon hand and crushed it to dust. With the thugs defeated, Rimuru noticed Ire's hand was injured from shattering the sword, so he healed her with his magic. While tending to her, Rimuru promised Ire that whenever she got hurt in a fight, he'd heal her. All she had to do was tell him. Once healed, Ire felt rejuvenated, as if blessed with new limbs, and they resumed their journey until they reached Sun City, also known as Barit City. Several days later, Ire found herself in a village assisting some dudes with carrying lumber by magically sending the logs into her dimensional storage. Abruptly, a mountain near the village erupted with hot magma and began overflowing toward the settlement. However, upon witnessing this, Ire decided to play the heroine by attempting to store the molten lava in her dimensional storage. Yet, just as she raised her hands, the sheer force of the magma overwhelmed her. At that precise moment, Ire, lying in an inn, jolted awake and realized it had all been a nightmare. Also, she glanced over and saw Rimuru already up, dressed, and looking fresher than a mint leaf. Noticing she was awake, Rimuru told her to get dressed and reminded her it was checkout time. However, as Rimuru watched, he saw Aya putting on her ragged slave clothes and, realizing Aya needed a wardrobe upgrade, dragged her to the nearest clothing store like a proud sugar daddy. Upon arriving at the clothing store, the merchant encouraged Aya to go wild, pick any outfit she liked, and change into the preferred clothes in the changing room. While standing unclad in the changing room and gazing at the mirror, Aya found herself in disbelief that, for the first time, a master was willing to provide her with fresh clothes. Aya had fun trying out numerous nice chickie outfits before settling for a nice top and a short mini skirt. To complete the makeover, Rimuru suggested they add a hat and a cape, and then announced that their next stop would be the weapon store. Upon reaching the weapon store, Rimuru and the merchant hit it off like old bros at a reunion, and when Aya inquired how they knew each other, the merchant explained that Rimuru's family name, Blanche, was well known among adventurers. The merchant then asked Rimuru if he planned to become an adventurer like his parents. Rimuru confirmed he did and then introduced Aya as his combat partner. Nevertheless, the merchant, with a condescending glance, remarked that Aya didn't seem like the combat type due to her built like a shoelace stature, and even questioned whether she could handle his weapons. Surprisingly, when he handed Aya his biggest sword, she wielded it flawlessly, as if it were crafted just for her. However, when Aya asked Rimuru if wielding such a massive weapon was necessary, Rimuru reassured her that it was essential for battling huge monsters on the way. With that, the pair continued their journey toward Realm. Along the way, Aya disintegrated her mighty sword into her dimensional storage, astonishing Rimuru, who had never imagined her storage could hold something so large. On a more serious note, Rimuru informed Aya that he wanted them to detour to his home to retrieve his luggage, which was just a day's walk from their current location. Misunderstanding what he meant, Aya blushed and asked if it was not too early for Rimuru to introduce her to his parents, but Rimuru sadly replied that his parents were deceased. To clarify further, Rimuru explained that his family had died protecting their town from a group of invading trolls. Mid-conversation, Aya suddenly interrupted him, saying that she sensed a strange energy. Intrigued by her ability, Rimuru asked if the horn on her head could react to mana, but before Aya could answer, a giant griffin swooped down from above, launching an attack. Fortunately, Aya managed to shove Rimuru out of harm's way. As the massive bird prepared for a second strike, Aya swiftly summoned her enormous blade from her dimensional storage. However, they then realized the creature was using the sun to hide its position. Suddenly, as the beast dove in for the final attack, Aya swung her blade with divine timing, cleaving it in two, literally cracking the earth and shattering her weapon in the process. Unfortunately, this feat took a severe toll on Aya's body, causing her to bleed from every opening. As she collapsed unconscious, Rimuru rushed to her side and, placing his hand on her, cast a powerful healing spell to restore her. Moments later, Aya finally regained consciousness only to find Rimuru's cultured hand resting comfortably on her flat chest bubbles. But before she could react, Rimuru quickly explained that physical contact was necessary for his rookie healing magic. When Aya asked what the heck had happened, Rimuru clarified that her human side couldn't withstand the beast's violent power. Still in recovery, Aya decided to rest for a while, and as she recuperated, Rimuru remembered her horn could detect mana, decided to test if his healing mana could channel through it. To try it out, Rimuru grabbed hold of Aya's horns and began to channel his mana into it. But when he noticed Aya didn't react in any way, Rimuru decided to crank it up, and suddenly Aya started to scream happy noises. She begged him to go deeper with the mana, and Rimuru in confusion instantly pulled his hand back like he had just touched a cursed artifact. After the awkward silence faded into twilight, Rimuru helped Aya to her feet, and they resumed their journey to his home. Soon, they finally arrived at Rimuru's hometown, where an attack from trolls about a year ago had destroyed the entire town. Hours later, Aya, who had initially collapsed just as they reached the town, woke up suddenly and realized she was in Rimuru's family home. She quietly tiptoed downstairs only to find the living room filled with a bunch of baggage littered on the ground. When she asked Rimuru what they were, Rimuru informed her that they were tools and potions he wanted her to store in her dimensional storage. Intrigued, Aya demanded to know what the tools were used for, to which Rimuru explained that they were high-class products allowing anyone to cast spells by channeling mana through them. However, before he could even finish his lecture, Aya grabbed one and accidentally nuked the roof with it, which greatly angered Rimuru. Meanwhile, just as Rimuru was scolding Aya for her reckless behavior and for destroying his home, a man with a goatee walked in and, upon seeing Aya pinned down by Rimuru, immediately assumed they were having a nice time. Sternly, the man began scolding them, advising that they were too young to clap. Confused, when Aya demanded to know who the guy was, Rimuru revealed that his name was Barnes, a former adventurer and blacksmith who was also his father's best friend. Observantly, Barnes took one glance at Aya and clocked she was a slave, since the only reason Rimuru needed a slave was as a bodyguard for his journey to Realm. Rimuru confirmed she was indeed his bodyguard, and then told Barnes they would need a weapon for her since her giant sword had broken during the battle with the griffin. Carefully examining the broken sword, Barnes commented that the metal couldn't withstand the power of Aya's dragon hand, which caused it to shatter. To assist, Barnes suggested they head to his workshop, promising to do all he could to find a weapon better suited for Aya's strong dragon hand. Yet, upon arriving at the workshop, Aya tried wielding numerous weapons, but every weapon she touched she ended up shattering them to pieces with her overwhelming strength, shocking Barnes and Rimuru as they watched. Thoughtfully, Barnes remembered he had just the perfect weapon to handle Aya's power. With that, he strutted deeper into his workshop and came back flexing a sword so massive it made the previous ones look like butter knives. Barnes then stabbed the giant sword into the ground, and as Aya picked up the blade capable of dividing even the firmament of heaven, she remarked on how light it felt. Barnes clarified that the blade was equipped with a weight enhancement, and, though it seemed heavy, the sword chose its owner. Encouragingly, Barnes told Aya to give it a test swing, and when she did, the mere force cracked the walls and split the ground. However, just after the swing, Aya felt intense pain in her hand, and upon noticing Aya clutching her hand in agony, Barnes pointed out that her body seemed to struggle with her immense power. To help Aya stop accidentally harming herself every time she uses her power, Barnes offered to teach her some basic techniques. Barnes assured Aya that if she learned how to hold back her powers properly, then using her powers would hurt less. To illustrate, Barnes showed her the essentials using a practice dummy and a plain sword. As he swung at the dummy, Barnes told Aya that with the right stance, ideal speed, and precise angle, she could wield her power effectively. But after the lesson, Aya complained that his techniques were too plain and basic and insisted she needed something flashy. Barnes responded that if she wanted a flashy attack, she simply needed to add a little mana to the techniques he'd taught her. Rimuru also encouraged Aya to learn the techniques, warning that it wasn't effective to continue using his healing magic on her, and then assured her that acrobatics would help her pick them up quickly. Generously, without being asked, Barnes offered to help Aya with special training, but warned that, while it promised great power in attacks, it left the attacker vulnerable. So, Aya got to work practicing the basics, while Barnes reassured her that mastering the techniques would prove useful on their journey to Realm. Once the training was over, Rimuru demanded to know how much the sword Barnes had given Aya cost, but Barnes snapped, yelling that if he wanted a sword for sale he could visit eBay, but his blade wasn't for sale. Firmly, Barnes clarified that both the sword and the techniques were sacred family treasures passed down from his knightly ancestors, forged for protecting the people they loved, not for flipping a profit. Emphatically, Barnes declared he'd never sell his treasured sword to anyone, and then informed Rimuru and Aya that he was only lending it to them. Gently, Barnes placed his hand on Aya's head and told her to ensure she returned safe and sound with his sword in one piece, and Aya nodded to show she understood. While alone with Rimuru, Aya remarked that he and Barnes looked like father and son than two dudes with a blacksmithing bromance, to which Rimuru revealed that she might be right since, back then, he used to follow his father and his father's friends on their adventures. They were like one big family. Not long after leaving Barnes' workshop, they ran into a black-haired man named Kyan and another man standing right beside him. Immediately, Kyan wasted no time scolding Rimuru for always leaving town, and then pointed out that he should at least say hi before departing again. However, he soon softened and told Rimuru that it was good to see he was back, because the entire townspeople had been worried sick about him. Upon learning that Rimuru would be leaving for another journey in a few days, Kyan gave him boxes of fruits and vegetables as a send-off gift. Just as they left Kyan's place, Rimuru informed Aya that they would be staying in his hometown for a week before heading to Realm. Nevertheless, during this 1 week, they would be training under Barnes to build their stamina and also studying the basics of magic. Subsequently, Rimuru led Aya to a room filled with dusty magic grimoires and instructed her that, since she had the mana bestowal gift, it would be best if she learned the basics of magic. With that, Rimuru left Aya to read, explaining that he had other important tasks to attend to, and for the following days, Aya took her time studying each of the magic books like a nerd. Whenever she needed explanations for things she didn't understand, she looked for Rimuru but found him fraternizing with the townspeople and decided to leave quietly. The next day, Barnes continued to teach Ire his sword techniques and was genuinely amazed that she had not only learned the basics but also some advanced techniques in just a few days of practice. When Barnes demanded to know if Ire was the daughter of some famous swords god or something to be so skilled, Rimuru interjected and informed him that Ire was suffering from amnesia and did not remember a single thing from her past. Shifting topics, Barnes promised to upgrade their gear since they were leaving the next day and then casually mentioned that the whole town was throwing a farewell rave in the square for Rimuru. Later that night, at the town square, Rimuru found Kyan and the others preparing for his send-off party. Noticing his surprised look, Kyan reminded him that his parents had done everything they could to protect the town, and it was only fair on their part to give their son at least a proper send-off. Meanwhile, Ire sadly noticed that Rimuru had little time for her and was more absorbed in his townspeople. Later at home, while Rimuru prepared for the party, he instructed Ire to store all the gifts they had received inside her dimensional storage. When Ire asked if she should store the gifts in the basement as well, Rimuru replied with a no, explaining that the stuff in the basement was just dangerous drugs that were of no use. Suddenly, a pack of hyperactive town kids rushed into the house, asking Rimuru to hurry up as the send-off party was about to start. Rimuru asked his town friends to chill for a minute and, turning to Ire, asked if she was ready, urging that they go to the party together. In response, Ire coldly asked if it was an order from a master to a slave, and when Rimuru replied saying no, Ire declined and said she wasn't going. As Rimuru and his friends left the house for the party, Ire, pacing around the house, thought about how close Rimuru was to the people of his town, which made her start to miss her own hometown. Moments later, as she wondered where she would end up when Rimuru was finally done with his task, she spotted a cute cat and chased after it. Just when she thought she had caught the cat, it slipped from her hand and headed down to the basement. Ire followed the cat toward the basement, but suddenly, she tripped and crashed headfirst down the stairs. Inside the basement, Ire began to relive her horrible past as a slave, recalling how she, alongside other girls, had been molested in a basement by their owner, and how they would scream for help but to no avail. Fortunately, Rimuru arrived just in time, but before he could rescue her from her horrible nightmare past, the slave collar on her neck activated, sending a massive surge of electricity down Ire's body. She collapsed on the spot, but Rimuru caught her just in time, and knowing that the slave collar on Ire's neck would only inflict terrifying pain on a slave when she defied her master, he grew even more curious. While in Rimuru's arms, Ire finally regained consciousness and muttered that she, too, would love to belong somewhere and have people who loved her. Furthermore, Ire mentioned that she had a home, a father, and neighbors, but the only thing she could vaguely remember was the education she received as a slave. However, before she could say more, Rimuru hushed her by reminding her that he was there for her. Ire interrupted, countering that she was just his slave and that someday he would no longer have a use for her. In response, Rimuru pointed out that she was right. One day she would no longer be his slave, but before then, he would have built her a house to live in, and if she still insisted on going home to her people, he would help her out. Stretching his hand to help her up, Rimuru promised that until then, he would never leave or abandon her, and then urged Ire to trust him and stay by his side. Just as Rimuru helped her up, Ire asked why he wasn't at the party, and Rimuru casually said he came back with food, because he knew her appetite was more dangerous than any monster. Additionally, Rimuru asked Ire to accompany him to the party if the food wasn't enough for her, and she excitedly agreed. The following morning, before they commenced their journey, Barnes provided body armor for them, one armor plate for Rimuru and a chest piece for Ire. Following that, Rimuru and Ire got dressed, bid farewell to Barnes, and set off on their journey to Realm. While on their way to Realm, Rimuru suggested they take a detour to a spot with a breathtaking view, to which Ire agreed, though she pointed out that they needed to have lunch there since she was dying of hunger. As they made their way to the spot, they unexpectedly bumped into a merchant accompanied by some adventurers hired to protect him. Rimuru instantly clocked the merchant as the same dude who'd been handing out food at his send-off party the previous night. Meanwhile, the sweet-looking female adventurers guarding the merchant recalled seeing Rimuru at the party and warmly invited him to join them for lunch. Rimuru was about to politely decline like a gentleman, but the moment he heard the chicks were adventurers, he agreed to join them since he planned on becoming an adventurer himself. As the group settled in for lunch, the girls clocked that Ire was a slave, but instead of pity, they started throwing side eyes full of envy because Rimuru was treating Ire better than you treat your actual girlfriend. Just then, one weak adventurer among them struggled to open the lid of a jam jar, only to be cautioned by the female adventurer that it was a magical tool requiring mana to unlock. Since the man couldn't manage it, Ire innocently offered to assist. But when she channeled her mana into the jar, it shattered in her hand, splattering its contents all over her. The female adventurers immediately scolded Ire for using too much mana, yet in her defense, Ire retorted that she could have opened it properly if the container hadn't been so flimsy instead of sturdy. Shortly thereafter, Rimuru accompanied Ire to the river to wash off the sticky mess clinging to her body caused by the broken jam. But while they were cleaning up, a deafening explosion occurred from the direction of the merchant, jolting them to attention. Meanwhile, chaos erupted as some low-life thugs had ambushed the merchant group, overpowering most of the adventurers. Even the female adventurers weren't spared, for a brutish, bald-headed thug gripped Amy, one of the adventurers, by the neck, threatening to go nasty with her before discarding her lifeless body like weak old leftovers. The poor girl trembled in terror as the brute vowed to pass her around like a blunt once he was done with her. However, before he could act on his vile threat, Ire intervened, spilling his guts with a fierce strike and declaring that if there was one thing she hated above all, it was scum who preyed on women. With one of their members taken out, the rest of the thugs immediately wasted no time charging at Ire. However, Ire moved like an assassin trained by shadows, swiftly taking them out one after the other. Realizing they were outmatched, a thug cleverly used a magic box to summon an impenetrable shield and smiled, confidently knowing that no ordinary adventurer could break it. Yet, to his utter shock, Ire activated her mana bestowal and effortlessly shattered his so-called impenetrable shield into nothing. As she took down most of the thugs, the last one desperately started begging for his life to be spared, claiming they weren't robbers but travelers attacked up the mountain by a beast. Nevertheless, Ire savagely stabbed his chest with her sharp dragon claws, ending his life in an instant. As the dust finally settled, Rimuru quickly rushed over to Amy, offering to heal her wounds. Gently placing his hand on her massive milkers, Rimuru healed her completely, and, feeling brand new, Amy gratefully thanked him for saving her life. When Amy casually commented on how strong Ire was, Rimuru explained that he had hired Ire as his bodyguard on his way to Realm, fully aware that traveling the dangerous roads alone was a death wish. After hearing this, Amy wisely advised him to ensure he took good care of Ire. Following this, Rimuru noticed that Ire was wearing a gloomy expression and firmly demanded to know what troubled her. Hesitantly, Ire opened up, confessing she felt sad, believing she could have saved everyone if she'd been just a bit faster. But Rimuru gently assured her that she did all she could and then praised her for attacking just as Barnes had taught her. He further remarked that, in fact, he was Barnes' first student, though, being utterly useless at combat, he had learned nothing. Following this, the remaining adventurers decided to bury their dead, and after paying respects to their fallen homies, they resumed their journey to the Adventurers Guild. Along the way, Amy curiously asked Rimuru why he had chosen to go to the Magic Academy in far-off Realm when he could simply enroll at the nearby Adventurer School. But Rimuru replied that the Adventurer School couldn't offer him exactly what he sought. Later, when the driver of the carriage announced they were nearing the main city, Ire, equally intrigued, also asked Rimuru the same question about his decision to travel all the way to the Magic Academy in Realm instead of choosing a closer one. To which Rimuru admitted he couldn't tell her the reason yet, but promised to reveal it when the time was right. Soon after, they entered the city, and Amy kindly showed them to the Adventurers Guild. Upon stepping inside, she pointed them toward the receptionist for registration, and then mentioned she'd be heading off to report on her quest. Just as she departed, Rimuru and Ire confidently headed over to the receptionist to get registered as adventurers. At first, the receptionist sternly warned that adventuring wasn't the kind of business young ones like them could handle. But when Rimuru calmly assured her everything would be fine since he had a combat slave to accompany him, the receptionist relented and handed them a form to fill out. After completing the form, the receptionist informed the duo that they needed to clear a common quest before they could become full-fledged adventurers. She then explained that there were 3 quests to choose from: picking a medieval herb, transporting lumber, or hunting for meat. Without hesitating much, Rimuru selected the lumber quest, though inwardly Ire knew he chose it because of her dimensional storage ability. Suddenly, an arrogant adventurer named Kevin, standing behind Rimuru and Ire, rudely yelled, demanding they either get lost or move out of his way. Kevin turned to the receptionist, smugly demanding to know what on earth was causing the delay. Meanwhile, Rimuru cast Kevin a quick side eye, then deliberately ignored him as if nothing had been said and proceeded to confirm with the receptionist that he would take the lumber side quest. With a smug tone, Kevin inquired whether Rimuru was interested in the lumber quest, and then informed him that he would be needing a horse for the mission. However, Rimuru walked past him like he didn't exist while clarifying that he didn't need his advice. Infuriated by this, Kevin shouted, called Rimuru a newbie, and sternly warned him never to speak disrespectfully again unless he wanted to be crushed into sand. At that precise moment, Ire stepped in, coolly asking the arrogant fool if his condescending behavior was how adventurers ought to conduct themselves, which only fueled Kevin's anger further. Without a second thought, Kevin seized Rimuru by the collar, threatening to beat the daylight out of him if he continued yapping. However, before Kevin could finish his threat, Ire swiftly landed a dragon fist punch to his ugly face, sending Kevin crashing into the nearest available wall. Ire followed up the attack by shoving her dragon-clawed hand into Kevin's mouth, and, with a cold stare, promised that if he ever touched her master again, she'd rip his mouth open immediately. Rimuru called Ire to order, sternly cautioned her never to act without his command, and then instructed her to wait outside. The receptionist, who had silently observed the entire scene, explained to Rimuru that Kevin's arrogance began after he defeated a goblin, and ever since, he had been prideful. While Ire waited outside for Rimuru, Amy approached her, casually asking if they had booked an inn for the night. When Ire replied that they hadn't, Amy shared that her party had received 2 rooms from the guild and kindly offered one to Ire and Rimuru. Amy asked if they would prefer the twin or double bedroom, and as Ire pondered her response, the scene shifted hours later to the room, where Rimuru grumbled bitterly that Ire had picked the twin bed over the double. When Ire explained that she chose the twin bed because it was more economical, since Amy had mentioned adventurers' bodyguards don't earn much, Rimuru failed to listen to her explanation and decided to sleep in the bathroom instead. The following morning, Rimuru woke up looking like a mess. When Ire asked if the reason he looked that way was because he had refused to sleep with her on the bed, Rimuru responded coldly that she was to blame. Hearing this, Ire began to wonder if the reason Rimuru had been avoiding to have fun with her was simply because he preferred Amy's busty pillows instead of her chopping board chest. She had always assumed young guys would smash anyone as long as they had, even if it was just a pimple on the chest, but since Rimuru avoided entering her hole, Ire concluded that her dragon traits must disgust him. Frustrated, Ire demanded to know if she was truly useful to Rimuru, to which Rimuru gently assured her that there was no one better suited for him than her. Several hours later, Rimuru and Ire arrived at the city's outskirts for the lumber quest, only to find Kevin there, still visibly fuming from his earlier thrashing by Ire. Rimuru and Ire walked over to meet the guy overseeing the quest, introduced themselves and explained their purpose. In response, the man outlined that the goal was to gather 6 logs within 3 days, but then asked them to wait since another adventurer was already working. While they waited, the overseer requested Rimuru to write down how many logs he could carry that day, and as Rimuru jotted it down, he confidently declared they would haul all 6 logs. Surprised, the man questioned if they could manage that much, then cautioned that it was wiser to play it safe than end up in a wheelchair. In addition, the man also warned Rimuru that magic beasts had suddenly been showing up around the vicinity lately, but Rimuru assured him that he was safe as long as his slave was with him. In response, the dude, skeptical, asked if Ire with her tiny statue could all handle 6 logs, and then pointing outside at Kevin. The dude informed Rimuru that even Kevin could only handle 3 logs, even with how hard his face was. Suddenly, an old man burst in, shouting about trouble. Calmly, the overseer asked if it involved a tree falling on someone, but the old man clarified that it wasn't that, and then revealed that a magic beast had appeared. Alarmed, the guy in charge ordered the old man to immediately evacuate everyone wounded in the vicinity and then go by horse to inform the guild in the city. Concerned, Rimuru offered to be of help, explaining that he could heal the injured, and the dude, grateful, thanked him. Meanwhile, as they stepped outside, they were stunned to see a massive grand hedgehog looming before the facility. Wasting no time, the proud Kevin launched an attack on the beast, ignoring the other adventurers' pleas to retreat. Rimuru shouted, urging Kevin to fall back and not throw his useless life away, but Kevin snapped back, calling him an idiotic newbie and demanding that Rimuru never underestimate him. Mid-attack, Kevin boasted that he was a true adventurer, claiming all adventurers were a bit crazy. Doubling down, Kevin insisted no one should belittle him, and then swore that retreating was the one thing adventurers never did. However, before he could even finish his rants, a mysterious force impaled his guts, sending him crashing to the ground. At that moment, Ire, with the speed of lightning, breezed through, grabbed Kevin by the hand, and dropped his half-dead body in front of Rimuru. Rimuru immediately summoned magic circles, with the intention of healing Kevin's deep wounds. While in the healing process, he instructed Ire to buy time, and instantly, Ire magically pulled her weapon from the store before charging at the beast. But the beast's claws nearly made her blind, leading her to realize she needed something longer if she was going to reach that oversized porcupine. At the same time, the quest manager approached Rimuru, who was still healing Kevin, and urged him to abandon Kevin since he wasn't responding to the healing, suggesting they move to another wounded victim. Yet Rimuru insisted that Kevin wasn't dead and refused to give up on him. Nevertheless, when the man persisted, arguing Kevin was already halfway to the great beyond, and that there was no need to waste precious time, Rimuru firmly declared that he was a Blanche, and because of that, he would never flee a battlefield while leaving injured people behind. Rimuru's staunch refusal to abandon Kevin disgusted the man to no end, so he turned to assist one of his own wounded members while remarking to Rimuru that he, too, would never abandon an employee. Before departing, though, the man pointed out that a mage from town would arrive any moment and then pleaded with Rimuru to temporarily give up on Kevin to tend to the other wounded victims. But Rimuru countered, insisting he needed more time. Back to the fight. After realizing her reach was too short, Ire picked up a heavy log of wood like a baseball bat to extend her range. She launched an attack and eventually struck the beast on its massive cranium, though this only provoked the monster further. The beast retaliated, immediately blasting Ire to the ground. As Ire lay sprawled on the ground knocked out cold, the sudden attack triggered a flashback from her past. Years earlier, back in her hometown, when she tried saving everyone by sending a massive volcano into her dimensional storage, but tragically, she was swallowed by the ash. Later, when she regained consciousness, she found herself buried under the rubble. Her body was crushed by the immense weight of the debris, and she could barely move. But just then she noticed a faint light from a small opening and struggled towards it. The light guided her to what looked like a cursed temple dedicated to an evil god. Inside this temple, she discovered a dragon corpse encased in ice. But since she was exhausted and hungry to death, she decided to rest in a corner of the temple. Soon, the hunger and thirst overwhelmed her, and since for a mysterious reason, the ice encasing the dragon began to melt, Ire had no choice but to chow down the dragon meat to survive. However, after a while of consuming the meat, her body started to transform, and she felt a suffocating pain in her chest. Her hand mutated into dragon scales with claws, horns sprouted from her forehead, and her leg regenerated into dragon scales. Back in the present, the sound of Rimuru shouting Ire's name jolted her back to reality, and she finally regained consciousness. Ire stood in front of the monster, yet this time she activated Mana Bestowal, which made her dragon claws 10 times bigger. As she attacked the beast, memories of her dead family flooded her mind, fueling her with enough strength that she finally managed to stab the monster with her massive sword, right in the middle of its forehead. With fierce determination, Ire swore that the beast would never make it out alive. Then she activated Mana Bestowal for the second time, driving her blade even deeper, causing blood to sprout out. She defeated the monster and, with just one hand, raised the beast skyward. Her blade sunk deep inside its belly. A few moments later, as the dust finally settled, the team discovered a precious magic stone inside the beast. The quest manager could hardly believe that Ire, despite her small stature, was able to defeat a monster that even veteran adventurers couldn't take down. Equally, he was impressed with the magic stones they found and pointed out that the guild would pay Rimuru handsomely for it. However, Rimuru was more concerned about the safety of his slave girl, and was stressed by the attention she would gather after defeating such a massive monster. Meanwhile, the quest manager reminded him that it might be impossible to cover up what just happened and pretend it didn't, considering the sea of blood on the scene and the huge magic stone they just found, which only frustrated Rimuru further. While pondering what to do, Rimuru glanced to the side and noticed Kevin's unconscious body lying on the ground. Suddenly, this ignited an idea, so he asked the quest manager if they could let Kevin take all the credit for defeating the monster. When the quest manager asked if they should lie that Kevin defeated the monster, Rimuru replied yes, stating he preferred it that way. Confidently, Rimuru elaborated on the lie, narrating that they would say Kevin and the beast were engaged in a fierce battle to the death, and after defeating the monster, Kevin sustained a massive injury to the head that gave him amnesia, leaving him unable to remember all that happened. Thoughtfully, the quest manager considered Rimuru's idea, rubbed the back of his head, and concluded it made sense. Shortly afterward, Ire bounced back like a champ and started the lumber quest by pulling all 6 heavy logs, while Rimuru just laid on them like a lazy royalty enjoying the view. During the activity, Ire revealed to Rimuru that, amid her fight with the beast, she remembered something from her past. Quietly, she elaborated that she used to live with her family at the foot of a huge volcano, but while trying to save them from an eruption, she got swallowed up by a massive blast. Before she knew it, she found herself in an unfamiliar temple. Furthermore, Ire narrated how she ate the dragon she found there and then transformed. When Rimuru inquired what happened next, Ire revealed that after she mutated, she felt an immense power surge from within her. Moments later, she explained how she roamed around the temple and stumbled upon a mysterious site that looked like a treasure vault, but found nobody there. However, Ire added that she put all the treasures she discovered into her dimensional storage and soon found an exit out of the temple, which she followed to leave. Yet when she made it outside, she encountered a guy who was initially excited to find a survivor. But the man was terrified to death when he saw her wings and dragon-scaled limbs, and concluded she was a demon. Ire tried explaining to the guy that she wasn't a demon, but the confused idiot slapped her face so hard like they were power slap opponents. Ire explained that she blacked out after the slap, and when she finally regained consciousness, she found herself imprisoned by a slave company. She couldn't even resist because of the slave collar around her neck, and soon discovered that some kind of drugs had been used to muddle their memories. Back in the present, when Rimuru asked if that was all she could remember, Ire replied with a yes. Rimuru then asked if she remembered the name of her village or anything before the eruption, to which Ire simply responded that she didn't recall any of those things. But before Rimuru could inquire whether the rare items they had initially found in her storage came from the temple, someone shouted their names from a distance. It turned out to be Amy, who approached them and asked if they were safe. Amy explained that they were worried when they heard they had been suddenly attacked by a hedgehog, and then asked Rimuru again if they were certain they were all right. In response, Rimuru assured her they were fine, but even though no one asked, Rimuru anxiously pointed out that someone else had clapped the beast, not them. Nervously, Rimuru further elaborated that they only assisted with the healing of the wounded people. After hearing what he had to say, Amy suggested they follow her to her inn so they could rest and recover in time. But when Rimuru reminded her that they were yet to complete the test, Amy clarified that the mission wasn't exactly a test, but rather a ploy to push odd jobs onto newcomers. A few hours later, they arrived at Amy's inn, where she gave Rimuru medicine to aid his recovery. While Rimuru was knocked out on the bed, Amy informed Ire that she would be heading back to the guild and would see them the following day. Ire thanked her for her help, and just as Amy left, Ire decided to take a nap with Rimuru. She removed her armor and dove right into the bed beside him. Suddenly, Rimuru woke up to find her sleeping next to him. Shocked, he shouted, demanding to know why she was so close to him and so exposed, to which Ire explained that she just wanted to make him feel better. The next day at the Adventurers Guild, the receptionist announced a good news that they had passed the test and were now officially adventurers. She then asked if they were willing to take their first request as adventurers and recommended a quest involving carrying lumber. However, Amy, who suddenly appeared out of nowhere, suggested that since she and her party were taking a quest to the city of Realm, Rimuru and Ire could join them on the journey together. The quest involved guarding a merchant, and when the team reached the location, they realized it was the same merchant Ire had saved from hoodlums. Surprisingly, they also noticed Kevin among the adventurers tasked with bodyguarding the merchant. When Rimuru inquired why Kevin had decided to take the quest, Kevin replied that he was heading to Realm. Rimuru then asked why he was heading to Realm, to which Kevin explained that after waking up from battling the monster hedgehog, he was being treated like a hero, with everyone praising him for defeating it. Kevin admitted he found that creepy, and, since he wanted no sudden expectations from people, he had decided to leave the town and head to Realm. Just then, Amy interrupted the conversation, informing Rimuru that another adventurer named Hamiya would be joining them on the mission, and then introduced her to the team. Soon after, the big-headed merchant announced that they were ready to leave, and thus the journey to Realm commenced. After riding some distance, the merchant's assistant announced that once they passed the hill, they would take a lunch break. Accordingly, once they crossed the hill, the team settled down to eat. While they were at it, Kevin approached Rimuru and Ire, asking if they were the ones who took down the hedgehog. When Rimuru denied it, reminding Kevin that he was the one responsible for defeating the monster, Kevin assured him there was no way he could have turned a monster into a pile of mush. Seeing no way out of it, Rimuru admitted they were the ones, and for the first time, Kevin swallowed his bitter pride and thanked him. This led Rimuru to reason that the guy might not be as bad as they had thought. Shortly afterward, the journey resumed, and inside the carriage, Rimuru asked Kevin what had happened to his slave. Kevin replied that he had chased the useless guy away, but Amy immediately chimed in, asking him not to phrase it in such a misunderstandable way. To clarify, Amy explained to Rimuru that Kevin had given his entire reward to his slave and set him free. Amy then pointed out that, despite being proud, Kevin was quite an honorable person. Hearing this made Rimuru feel somewhat guilty, so he apologized to Ire for not being able to set her free just yet, to which Ire replied that she didn't mind at all. At that moment, the Mario Brothers-looking merchant announced to the team that they had finally arrived at Realm. The team stood to confirm, and as they looked, they realized they had reached the hilly city of Realm. Ire then turned to Rimuru, pointing out that they had finally made it to Realm, to which Rimuru responded with a silent yes. However, to Rimuru, Realm was merely a stop on his journey, for his actual goal lay even further ahead. Meanwhile, inside a certain building, a black-haired lady approached another blonde lady named Ellie, asking why she was unusually happy despite just waking up, and then inquiring whether she had a good dream. Ellie replied with a yes, and then explained that she had dreamt of heroes changing the world. Upon entering the city of Realm, which had always been Rimuru's goal, they bid goodbye to their travel companion, and subsequently, for the next 2 weeks, all they did was prepare for the Magic Academy entrance examination. On the day of the entrance examination, Rimuru and Ire arrived at the magnificent Realm Magic Academy, and before going inside, Ire cheered Rimuru on to do his best. The entrance examination comprised 5 subjects, including a written exam in history, language, magic, and medicine. Additionally, there was also the practical exam, which would take place just after. As Rimuru entered the exam hall, all bodyguards were asked to wait outside for their bosses. Consequently, Ire walked over to the canopy prepared for bodyguards to wait. Stepping inside the canopy, she was greeted with a disgusted look. Suddenly, some crusty mop-headed dude clocked her slave collar and shouted what the heck a slave was doing among them. Ire felt embarrassed, but before she could say anything, the rest of the bodyguards started to insult and gossip about how the canopy wasn't meant for filthy slaves but bodyguards. The noise alerted the man in charge, and promptly, when he got inside the canopy, asking what the heck was going on, the mop-haired dude informed him that a filthy slave had gotten in. The man in charge wasted no time, scolding Ire for getting in and firmly announced that there was no place for slaves in there. When the man warned that if she didn't get out immediately, her master would be expelled even before he got admitted, Ire shoved the rough-haired man aside and angrily left the canopy in annoyance. Strolling around the school building, Ire remembered that was how slaves had always been treated, but having been with Rimuru, who had treated her like a queen, she had forgotten what it felt like to be abused and looked down on. To pass time while waiting for Rimuru, Ire whipped out her sword and started slicing the air with elegance, and at that moment, someone watching her practice started to clap for her. It turned out to be Ellie standing on the balcony, who, completely mesmerized by the sword practice she watched, asked Ire who she was. Ire introduced herself as the bodyguard to one of the students taking the entrance exam, but Ellie couldn't hear her well from upstairs and told Ire to chill while she joined her on the ground. Ellie decided to descend like Tarzan climbing the window and then used a tree branch as a means of getting down, but unfortunately, the branch wasn't strong enough, so it broke, and she fell. But Ire was luckily right there to catch her just in time before she plastered herself to the ground. Afterward, Ellie introduced herself to Ire as a first-year student and part of the library committee and gratefully thanked Ire for saving her life. However, just then, Ellie noticed that Ire was a slave but still complimented Ire on how good-looking she was. When Ellie mentioned that Ire's master must really take good care of her because of how good she was, Ire responded, telling her that her master was a really kind person. Touched, Ellie remarked that since her master was a kind person, it would be nice if he got accepted into the academy, causing Ire to wonder how Rimuru must be doing in the exam. Meanwhile, inside the school, it was time for the practical exams. The exam instructor announced that for the exam, the aim would be to shoot the withered piece of the world tree with whatever spell the candidate was comfortable using. Furthermore, the examiner pointed out that the practical exam would be in groups. The practical exam started, and the first group of students wasted no time unleashing fiery blasts at the world tree. One particular student summoned multiple magic circles that rained a powerful surge of electricity on the tree. Watching the first set of students show their magical prowess, Rimuru was greatly impressed. Next, Group C was called in, and this was Rimuru's exact group. Rimuru walked straight to the world tree, and as he placed his hand on it, magical circles appeared. This caused the other set of students to laugh and mock him. One student laughed at the fact that Rimuru had to make contact before using healing magic, since everyone knew that healing magic was basically useless if it couldn't be used at a distance. Soon after, Ire, who had been waiting outside the school gate, noticed Rimuru strolling out wearing a sad expression and asked him how the exam went. But Rimuru ignored her question and simply replied that they were leaving. Upon getting to the inn that day, Rimuru informed Ire that he passed the written exam but failed the practicals. Nevertheless, he would be resuming school the following week. Ire congratulated him, but as she moved toward him, Rimuru also informed her that he would be setting her free from slavery. This came as a shock to Ire, and as she asked why he would want to do that, Rimuru reminded her that when he initially bought her as a slave, he had told her that her job was to get him safely to Realm, which she had done. Now, she had no reason to continue being his slave and was free to go. But Ire, moved with emotion, bear hugged Rimuru and begged him not to release her. She grabbed tightly to his scrawny body, nearly crushing his skeleton to stardust, but quickly apologized when she realized Rimuru was clutching his hand in pain. As Rimuru healed his broken hand, he reminded Ire that he had earlier promised to tell her why he desperately needed to enroll in Realm Magic Academy and asked if she was ready to hear. Ire replied, vowing to stay by his side forever, and then begged that he tell her the reason. Rimuru dramatically revealed that his goal was to develop a resurrection spell. To elaborate, Rimuru explained that the reason why he had instructed Ire earlier back in his home not to enter the basement was because he was preserving his parents' corpses down there. Rimuru further revealed that the Magic Academy in Realm housed the largest and oldest library in the world, which was very essential for him to conduct research in creating the resurrection spell. Moreover, Rimuru clarified that since the resurrection spell was a taboo in the country, just knowing about it could put a person's life in danger, which was why he didn't want Ire to be a part of it. Yet, Ire placed her hand on his palm and assured him that she would never leave his side, and Rimuru, touched by her genuine show of affection, thanked her. The next day, while walking the street, Ire asked Rimuru if he would be buying everything he would need for school, to which Rimuru replied with a yes, but informed her that to do so, they would need to reunite with Amy at the Adventurer Guild to find a quest to earn the cash he would need. When Ire asked why he couldn't just sell the items she got in her dimensional storage instead, Rimuru replied that the stuff in her storage was too valuable to be sold, so their only option would be to work by doing some quests. With that, Ire excitedly sprinted ahead, ready to make some money, but Rimuru warned her not to run ahead since she had no idea where the guild was. But Ire turned back and reminded him that she was no longer his slave and didn't have to follow his orders anymore. Hours later, the duo arrived at the capital city of Realm, where the Adventurer Guild was, and found Amy and Kevin already waiting, waving at them. On getting close to where Amy and Kevin were, Amy congratulated Rimuru on gaining admission into the academy, and Rimuru thanked her. Rimuru then asked Amy if she had found any good quests, to which she replied, and was about to say something that happened earlier about Kevin, but Kevin tried shutting her up. When Rimuru pressed to know what happened, Amy revealed that Kevin was earlier crying worse than a girl because the guild prohibited him from going on a quest alone. Feeling embarrassed, Kevin chimed in, explaining that it was because all the quests he could take involved facing dangerous monsters. Rimuru immediately interrupted him, asking if they could take the quest together since they should be good with Ire by their side. Ire, now doubled, replied, saying the quest should be easy peasy. This terrified the rest of the team, who wondered when the heck Ire became a twin. Stunned, the two Ires looked at each other and instantly started throwing hands at each other's faces violently. Trying to figure out which one of the Ires was a fake, Rimuru decided to use his gift to identify which one possessed the dimensional storage ability. Instantly, the moment Rimuru discovered the truth, he alerted Amy to the imposter, and Amy swiftly blasted the fake Ire with a water bullet. The water bullet peeled off part of the faker's face, revealing those demonic, dark, sinister eyes beneath the skin, leading Rimuru and Amy to conclude that the mastermind behind the doppelganger was employing transformation magic. With one part of the face ripped out, the evil doppelganger charged at Ire with a ferocious punch, but Ire blocked the punch with her dragon palm. Ire wasted no time activating Mana Bestowal and countered with a powerful attack of her own. Noticing that Ire was using mana bestowal as a boost, the doppelganger remarked that it was time to get serious and, shockingly, transformed into a monstrous dragon. Seeing this, everyone was shocked to the bones, and Ire immediately soared upward to confront the dragon, demanding to know what it wanted and why it was attacking them. Arrogantly, the dragon retorted that it was bold for a thief to ask such a question, and then demanded that Ire return what she had stolen from its vault. However, before Ire could respond, the dragon unleashed a powerful dragon breath upon her. Terrified, Rimuru shouted out of fear for Ire to watch out. Surprisingly, though, as the attack struck, Ire stored the dragon breath in her dimensional storage. The dragon was shocked and could not believe what just happened. Yet, before the dragon could prepare a second assault, Ire boldly declared she would return its breath and, from her dimensional storage, blasted the dragon with its own attack. Moments later, as the team gathered, they looked down, stunned to see that the defeated dragon had magically transformed into a girl. Curiously, Rimuru asked the girl who she was, and the underdeveloped Barbie introduced herself as Eeg, the demon dragon tasked with guarding the vault of the evil god. Eeg explained that Ire had stolen various items from the vault she protected, including a magic transmitter that guided her to the thief's location. Turning to Ire, Eeg clarified that the transmitter belonged to the god of destruction and insisted on its return. For emphasis, Eeg further revealed that the god of destruction had shattered the world tree during the Great War between gods and demons 500 years ago. Observing Ire staring at her like she knew absolutely nothing about what she was yapping about, Eeg inquired whether she wasn't the girl present at the volcano's base when it erupted. Silently, Ire refused to answer while Rimuru appeared troubled. Kevin, at that moment, interjected, asserting that Eeg was clearly exaggerating since Ire obviously possessed no treasures. Instantly, Rimuru recalled that he hadn't informed Kevin and Amy about Ire's dimensional storage ability, so he promptly revealed her gift to them. Nevertheless, seeing that no one believed her tale, Eeg grew frustrated and transformed back into a dragon, urging them to trust her. Alarmed, Rimuru immediately cautioned her against transforming into a dragon in the middle of the city. Still agitated, Eeg blasted the sky with her fire breath, but Rimuru sternly warned her against that as well. Just as Rimuru explained that the townspeople would freak out if they eventually saw a dragon in the sky, a random guy suddenly approached the team asking if they had seen a dragon in the sky, claiming he had seen the dragon with his 2 eyes. Kevin tried to silence the man to prevent others from hearing, but it was too late, for within seconds, a crowd gathered, demanding to see the dragon. Rimuru, knowing the publicity was not what he wanted at that moment in time, stepped forward and addressed the crowd, falsely claiming that Kevin was the dragon slayer who had defeated the beast. Shocked, Kevin was speechless, but before he could protest, a man from the crowd asked if he was the same Kevin who had vanquished the monstrous hedgehog, and concluded that it now made sense. Kevin attempted to object, but Rimuru grabbed his shoulder and pulled him to a secluded spot. Quietly, Rimuru promised that if Kevin played along, he and Ire would party with him for the next 3 years, handling any dangerous beasts while Kevin took the credit. This agreement clearly made sense to Kevin, for upon returning to the crowd, he admitted he had slain the dragon. With that resolved, Rimuru suggested they leave while Kevin handled the paparazzi, but Amy declined, stating she'd be too worried to abandon him. Rimuru had no problem with that, and then pointed out that he was going to have a private talk with Eeg, while Amy proposed they embark on a quest together the next day since they hadn't settled on one yet. Shortly afterward, Rimuru, Ire, and Eeg returned to the inn. Wasting no time, Rimuru, curious, asked Eeg to tell them about Ire's hometown. Ire looked a bit tensed when Rimuru mentioned about her hometown, while Eeg demanded to know if they truly wanted to hear about it. In response, Rimuru replied that all they knew was that a sudden disaster had struck the place, leaving few survivors. When Eeg asked if Rimuru still wished to know despite this, Rimuru affirmed he did. With that, Eeg revealed that the volcanic eruption had completely destroyed the road to Ire's hometown, meaning it would take 3 months of land travel through mountains to reach it. Moreover, Eeg disclosed that everyone in the town had been buried by ash. Hearing this heartbreaking news, Rimuru turned to Ire to check if she was fine, but she assured him she was fine since she remembered neither the place nor its people. However, Rimuru pointed out that although the memories might be gone, the feelings would always be there. When Ire asked if that explained her constant sadness and wish to be rid of those feelings, Rimuru mentioned that he believed feeling sad was also significant. In that emotional moment, Rimuru hugged Ire and began discussing a trip to her hometown. But Ire refused and suggested they could do it later, and he should just focus on school since there was no hurry. However, Rimuru promised that someday he'd fulfill his vow to take her there, and Aya replied she'd hold him to it. Noticing their bond, Ig jokingly suggested they get a room. But Rimuru clarified they weren't in the smashing type of relationship. Surprised, Ig asked why, to which Rimuru explained it was because they were still young. Ig remarked that she was impressed with their abstinence, but then mentioned that she had the perfect gift for them. She turned to Ire and revealed that among the treasures she stole from the demon god temple, there was a white liquid jar. When Ire showed her the jar containing the white liquid, Ig explained that the white liquid inside was the god of destruction aphrodisiac. Whispering, Ig informed Ire that the aphrodisiac worked like a miracle for getting any guy to look her way, which Ire found really interesting. With that, Ire wasted no time opening the jar despite Rimuru warning her against opening something that looked really suspicious. At that moment, Ire felt an intense sensation of lust and her inner thighs were getting ticklish and in need of some intense stroking. Panicking, Rimuru turned to Ig asking if she could do something about the situation, to which Ig replied saying all she could do was stay and watch to ensure everyone was safe since the aphrodisiac was quite a dangerous drug. To calm Rimuru, Ig assured him that it wasn't a poison or hypnotism, just a drug that made the peach excited. But still, Rimuru shouted, asking why on earth such a drug would even be in a temple in the first place, and then decided to use healing magic to fix the problem. Rimuru clarified that since Ire's horn was sensitive to mana, he would just make her climax through her horn to calm her down. Rimuru started channeling mana into Ire's horn, causing her to scream worse than a chick getting piped by a BBC. Meanwhile, at the Realm Magic Academy faculty room, the director, Warak, and a fellow teacher discussed about the plans for the upcoming orientation. While going through the plans on the paper, Warak pointed out how the students that were ranked F class had the same scores as even those that were ranked A class, and thought it would be best to teach the F ranks their place in the school. The first day of school finally arrived. However, Rimuru appeared visibly worried. Noticing this, Ire approached him and inquired about the issue, to which Rimuru responded that he was anxious about what she would wear to school. Rimuru elaborated that half the students at the academy were nobles who would arrive with their impeccably dressed bodyguards. Moreover, Rimuru highlighted that it would be tough for Ire to wear the same outfit to school every day. At that moment, Ig interjected, assuring them there was no cause for concern. She explained that among the treasures in the vault, there were surely clothes fit to impress the upper class. A few moments later, Rimuru stood dressed in his school uniform, ready to leave for school, while Ire declared she was prepared as well. With that, Rimuru directed them to head out, though Ire, dressed like a retired stripper, trudged behind. When Rimuru turned and saw Ire looking a cast from 50 Shades of Grey, he immediately demanded to know why she was dressed that way. Before Ire could answer, Ig stepped in, showcasing the outfits and explaining they couldn't decide between the two, while Ire concluded she'd chosen the one she thought he'd prefer. But Rimuru immediately ordered her to change into the second outfit. Shortly thereafter, Rimuru and Ire arrived at the Magic Academy, where Rimuru discovered he'd been assigned to Class F. Ire then noted she'd need to head to the bodyguard waiting room, and Rimuru agreed, saying he'd catch up with her later. Minutes later, Rimuru entered his classroom, only to receive a cold reception from his peers. Soon after, the teacher, Warak, entered as well, announcing he was in charge of Class F. To kick off the session, Warak revealed that in 2 weeks, they'd camp in the Northern Forest, home to elves, for orientation, and all students would need to fend for themselves. Warak further clarified that students were sorted into classes from A to F based on exam scores. Additionally, Warak disclosed that a competition between class ranks would take place at the orientation, offering them a chance to prove themselves as the academy's underdogs. Just then, a cute girl from Class F interrupted, asking if they'd spend the night at the camp, which Warak confirmed. Irritated, she protested that sleeping in the forest was too barbaric, but Warak calmly countered that, as the lowest-ranked students, they couldn't afford to be choosy. Hearing this, she fell silent and returned to her seat. Meanwhile, Rimuru, sitting quietly, reflected on Warak's words and realized that as the lowest-ranked students, they lacked the luxury of choosing their lessons, and failing a test could end their school life. When a black-haired boy asked if bodyguards could join the orientation, Warak affirmed they could since most high-ranking nobles lacked camping skills. Before dismissing the class, Warak advised them to prepare for anything and hinted they could learn more about the orientation in the library, though he quickly stopped himself. As Warak exited, the other students promptly left, too, leaving Rimuru worried that the teacher had given such a huge hint. Yet the lazy losers had just gone home like it didn't concern them. However, Rimuru decided to head to the library to check out the hint. Thus, Rimuru headed to the bodyguard area to fetch Aya, but was stunned to see her drawing so much attention from guys trying to riz her for looking like a snack in her maid outfit. Spotting Rimuru, Aya rushed to him, leaving the others jealous and wondering who the heck the beanstalk was. This annoyed Aya, but Rimuru immediately stepped in to avoid any altercation. Following this, Rimuru and Aya entered the library, where Ellie noticed Aya, so Ellie approached Aya and remarked that her presence in the academy must mean that her master got in, which Aya confirmed before introducing Rimuru. Ellie then asked Rimuru if he sought anything specific in the library. She added that, as a library committee member and his senior, she'd gladly assist with whatever he needed. Rimuru thanked her and inquired about books on high-rank healing magic, explaining his interest as a healer. In response, Ellie revealed such books were located underground. As Rimuru marveled at the vast underground section, Ellie explained that the further one go down the library, the larger the floors became. When Rimuru asked if qualifications were required to enter the underground floors of the library, Ellie clarified that access depended on school year, grades, and extracurriculars. Ellie further revealed that further down the library one go, the more specialized and dangerous information one would get. This led Rimuru to deduce that to obtain the knowledge he sought, he'd need to descend further. He also realized sneaking in at night wasn't an option. Raising his status was the only way, and to do that he would need to start by doing well at the upcoming orientation. To that end, he told Ellie he'd come to research the orientation. Handing him a book, Ellie explained it contained all past orientation records and a map of the Elven Forest. Suddenly, the pretty baddie from Rimuru's class appeared, announcing she too wanted to review past orientations. However, a library attendant informed her that another student was making use of the record. When the girl looked to see who, she realized it was Rimuru, and then mentioned that she would be back later. When Rimuru was done, after hours of reading, Rimuru felt a shoulder twitch and decided to stop for the day. However, Ellie advised that since he just got enrolled, there was no need to rush and read everything in one day like he was Jimmy Neutron. Still, Rimuru insisted on ranking up and getting better. Rimuru was determined never to let a single chance to enter the underground floor of the library pass him by. Curious from his reading, Rimuru asked Ellie if orientation tasks always involved gathering materials, which she confirmed, explaining that it was a yearly tradition. Reflecting on this, Rimuru pondered how Class A received the easiest tasks while Class F got the toughest. Over the next 2 weeks, Rimuru diligently gathered orientation intel at the library. Additionally, on weekends, he took quests with his team into the Elven Forest, gaining a solid grasp of Realm's geography and even upgrading his weapon at the blacksmith. Weeks later, the orientation day arrived, and all students, alongside Warak, assembled in the Elven Forest. Class F students began gossiping about Class A bringing 90 adventurers, and the other ranks above them also brought quite a large number, which they deemed unfair. Just then, Warak silenced the side talks and called for their attention. Warak announced that it was time to designate tasks to the different ranks. For Class A, Warak tasked them with gathering philo leaves, thrilling them due to the leaves' abundance. Next, Warak assigned Class B to collect kuko nuts and Class C to gather Ragunya stones. When Ire asked what these were, Rimuru explained they were rare healing materials, though the rate of completion of the task was pretty high. Then, Warak tasked Class D with catching spring rabbits and Class E with collecting a kilogram of wilted branches. Finally, Class F students recoiled in shock when Warak assigned them to gather a kilogram of giant bee honey. When Ire questioned what giant bees were, Rimuru grimly revealed that a single bee's massive stinger and lethal venom could end one life instantly, and taking their honey meant facing a swarm. Even Ire's overpowered strength wouldn't suffice. Unfazed, Warak declared they could quit and fail if the task seemed impossible. At that, a Class F student shouted that it was cruel tyranny. Sternly, Warak warned that abusive language was forbidden and threatened disqualification for anyone who protested without withdrawing. Another student, wearing glasses, suggested it was an academy ploy to make them motivational examples for higher ranks, since the higher ranks were given very easy tasks as opposed to what they were given. The pretty chick also asserted they were mere sacrifices, while Rimuru just looked visibly tensed. Before long, the cruel teacher, Warak, was in his office thinking about the task he had given to Class F. He knew it was a hard one, and he could only hope the students would survive their mission against the deadly forest bees. But nothing would give him greater pleasure than getting at least one student casualty. Later that night, at the quiet Class F orientation-based cottage, Rimuru and Ire, cloaked in dark garments, prepared for their honey-collecting mission while everyone else was asleep. But before they left, Rimuru wanted to go over the plan one more time. The plan was simple. Rimuru would distract the bees while Ire snuck around and took them all out at once. After Ire got rid of all the bee soldiers, they would collect the honey. Once they both understood the plan clearly, they were ready to go. But suddenly, Ire felt danger coming. In one fluid motion, she spun around and slashed her blade through the air. She sliced through something, and it turned out to be a worm-like creature that died right away from her single strike. When Rimuru rushed back and asked what had happened, Ire told him they had suddenly been ambushed by a magic beast. This struck Rimuru as strange based on what he knew about the forest. Magic beasts were supposed to appear farther up the mountain, nowhere near the student's cottage. Still, he dismissed the thought and told Ire they should get going, but stay on high alert this time. As they moved deeper into the forest, Ire continued taking out several magic beasts, her sword slicing through the darkness like a phantom, which only added to Rimuru's confusion. Suddenly, a new set of monsters burst from the gloom, each one encased in shimmering bubbles of magical energy. They closed in on Rimuru with terrifying speed, but Ire, already engaged with another group, quickly yelled for him to watch out. Rimuru was too slow to react, but just then, a blinding flash erupted, drowning the forest in light. Someone had used magic to eliminate the monsters. It turned out to be the pretty girl from Rimuru's class, who immediately scolded him for being a bit too careless. When Rimuru just stood there awkwardly, not recognizing her, the girl was visibly annoyed. She angrily introduced herself as Maria Velmart and reminded him that they were in the same class. Rimuru quickly apologized for not remembering her, blaming it on the fact that he'd been busy studying and working as an adventurer. But then, the name Velmart rang a bell. Rimuru recalled that the Velmarts were a powerful noble family known for offering many high-paying jobs at the guild. That aside, Rimuru asked Maria what she was doing out so late at night. Maria replied that, since giant bees have terrible vision in the dark, the best time to act was at night, so it should have been obvious why she was out. She further explained that, since the other students had no clue about this and were snoring their lives away at the cottage, she decided to take advantage of the situation and go without them holding her back. With that, Maria joined Rimuru and Ire, and the three of them continued deeper into the forest in search of the giant bees. Along the way, they were repeatedly attacked by monsters of various species. Ire cut down most of them with precision like an assassin. Maria blasted the rest with her magic, while Rimuru mostly just watched, impressed by the girl's abilities. With the threat cleared, Rimuru approached Maria and asked her a question. He wanted to know why, despite being from a powerful family, she was in Class F instead of a B or C. Without giving it much thought, Maria replied that she had always wanted to succeed on her own, using her own talent without relying on her family name or status. Rimuru understood her point, but there was no time for deeper conversation, so he insisted they continue with the mission now that the immediate threats were gone. But before they could take another step, Rimuru noticed something odd about the area. There was something strange going on with the monsters. Maria felt it too, something wasn't right. She sensed that someone might be behind all of this. She immediately suggested they abort the mission and return to the cottage. But before they could turn, the earth beneath them suddenly pulsed. A radiant glow lit the ground, crackling with arcane symbols. They were shocked. It turned out the team had stepped on a teleportation spell. Realizing this, Rimuru immediately shouted for everyone to hold on to each other. But before Ire could grab her master's hand, they all vanished into thin air. Rimuru and Maria found themselves in a swamp, with no sign of Ire anywhere nearby. Since they had no idea where they were, Maria suggested it would be best to stay put and wait until morning. But just then, Rimuru heard a buzzing sound and immediately told Maria to be quiet. He scanned the murky surroundings and noticed that they were surrounded by giant bees. Peeking from behind a tree, he figured that if so many bees were here, their nest had to be close by. But then another thought crossed his mind. Someone had to be responsible for that teleportation spell and for the sudden appearance of all these monsters. That could only mean one thing. Someone was plotting something. They were in serious danger. Rimuru turned to inform Maria of his plan to escape, but stopped in his tracks when he saw her injury. A sharp tree branch had stabbed her in the thigh, dangerously close to her mushi. It was a deep wound, and Rimuru quickly suggested healing it before it got infected. But Maria immediately warned him. If he used that blinding healing spell he'd shown back at the entrance exam, it would be like sending the bees an invitation. Rimuru told her there was another way, one that didn't emit as much light. However, it required him to touch the wound directly. Maria hesitated for a moment, but then nodded in agreement. So Rimuru carefully embraced her as he began the healing process. Though he tried to control the output, the sensation of being healed in such a delicate spot made Maria let out a bird-like sound. The joyful noise instantly caught the bee's attention. Rimuru stopped the spell midway and quickly covered her mouth with his hand. When he angrily asked why she was making so much noise, Maria was just as annoyed. She demanded to know what kind of healing magic involved hugging someone out of nowhere. Rimuru explained that he was still a novice and couldn't fully suppress the light, so his only option was to block it with his body. But Maria immediately chimed in, saying she wasn't talking about the hug or the bright light. She shyly said she was talking about why, while he was healing her, it seemed like the nerves all over her body were receiving a shock. Hearing this, Rimuru started to think deeply. He knew that the Velmart family were known for being excellent magicians. For this reason, Rimuru reasoned that it must be because Maria was a gifted magician. She had been sensitive to Hiyamana. The same sensitivity that I had on her horns was the same for Maria, but instead of the horns, Maria would feel it all over her body. With time against them, Rimuru urged her to focus on the healing. Maria agreed, but said this time she'd cover the light herself with her skirt. Rimuru was fine with that, so he resumed the healing. While he worked, Maria tried putting her hand over her mouth to stop herself from screaming, but Rimuru kept whispering for her to keep it down. A few minutes later, he was done, though Maria was blushing hard from embarrassment. But just as they were about to leave, they spotted a giant bee hovering in front of them. They immediately froze. Maria wasted no time. She blasted the bee with a burst of mystic energy. The attack took it down instantly, but also summoned more bees to the area. Seeing the overwhelming number of bees, Maria began to panic, but Rimuru remained calm. He remembered the magic spell Maria had just used. It was powerful. If she kept using it, then maybe, just maybe, they could survive the night. So he asked her to keep firing at the bees with her magic spell, to which Maria agreed. But after a series of blasts here and there, they realized the bees were just too many. It looked like there was no end. Maria was growing tired, but Rimuru assured her that with all the magic light she had dispersed while blasting the bees, Ira should have noticed their whereabouts, wherever she was. And that was exactly the case. Just a few miles away, Ira was already perched atop a tree branch, using her dragon-enhanced eyesight to scan the area. When she spotted Rimuru and Maria, she swooped in at the perfect moment and took out a couple of lingering bees. She immediately asked if they were okay, and Rimuru replied that they were fine. Just then, a couple of other elves who had heard noises deep in the bushes rushed in, asking the same question. Rimuru reassured them as well. He then turned to Ire and asked where the teleportation spell had taken her. Ire revealed that she had been sent to the middle of a magic beast flock, and the moment she saw the bright light, she knew it had to be Rimuru. Just then, all their hard work finally paid off. Suspended from a thick tree branch, woven from golden resin and glowing faintly in the moonlight, was the massive bee nest. The following day, massive jars of honey were dropped on the ground. When Warak saw them, he was stunned. He couldn't believe his eyes. With a slight smirk, Rimuru informed him that the jars were filled with giant bee honey collected by the rank F team. Warak was in disbelief. He insisted it was impossible for the team to gather that much honey in just one night. Still unconvinced, he demanded to know how they managed it. Rimuru calmly explained that they had covered the bee nest with cloth, used smoke and heat to weaken the remaining bees, and then brought the nest back to extract the honey. This explanation only irritated Warak further. He shouted that this was a magic academy, and the fact that they had barely used magic to complete the task was unacceptable. The elf dudes from earlier quickly jumped in, pointing out that Rimuru and his team had fought the giant bees using magic, which should count for something. At that moment, the school's headmaster intervened, reminding Warak that the purpose of the lesson was to let students experience gathering materials on their own, so even if they hadn't used much magic, their approach was still valid. Hearing this made Warak furious, but he couldn't argue. The headmaster then brought up the mysterious teleportation spell that had appeared in the forest. Warak grew visibly nervous but remained silent. The headmaster concluded by declaring that, since the task was complete, the students of Class F could rest until the final day of the assessment, while Warak continued to simmer in anger. Later that day, Rimuru returned to the Class F camp, where the rest of the group sat on the ground, completely exhausted from collecting honey all night. Rimuru thanked them for their efforts and apologized for making them work so hard. Just then, a smug voice called out, asking if that was the cottage of Class F. The guy with glasses replied curtly, saying it was rude to ask a question without first introducing oneself. The dude, clearly a spoiled brat, then introduced himself as Franz, heir to the duchy, but he immediately insulted the bespectacled student, calling him an ingrate and demanding respect. When Franz bragged that he was also the top student of Class A, Maria jumped in and asked what a future duke and supposed top student wanted with them. Franz turned to her and smirked smugly. He called Maria the leftover daughter of Count Velmart and insulted her, saying her older brother took all the talent and left her with none. The insult left Maria speechless. Franz said he had come because he heard that Class F, their inferior, had completed their task before Class A, so he wanted to know how they had pulled it off. Maria immediately assured him that no one was going to tell him anything. But before she could finish her sentence, Rimuru told Franz everything, without holding back, and then asked him to leave. But Franz moved closer to Rimuru and sneered that, as expected, Class F had used cheap tricks. That was a mistake. Just then, Ira stepped between them and placed her blade on Franz's neck, causing Franz to almost wet his pants. Ira coldly told him that she didn't care if he was a top student or a duke, she wouldn't mind sending him to the pearly gates for Rimuru's sake. Luckily, another girl named Sarah quickly interrupted and tried to make peace. She pulled Franz away and apologized to Class F for the trouble the proud idiot had caused. However, Rimuru told her not to worry about it. With that, Sarah asked them to have fun and then led Franz away. Watching them leave, Ira informed Rimuru and Maria that Sarah was the second best student of Class A. She added that Sarah was supposed to be number 1, but Franz had claimed the title thanks to his family's influence. Following this, the rest of the orientation went on peacefully. Days later, Ire trained her swordsmanship with Eeg. Eeg was one of the few who could keep up with Ire's overpowered ability. After sparring for hours and trying different sword techniques, there was no clear winner, but it was obvious Ire was exhausted from wielding her giant sword. Eeg noticed this and pointed out how tired she was. She told Ire that she wasn't really suited for a sword and advised her to fight in a way that took better advantage of her raw power. Eeg suggested that instead of a sword, Ire could use a pair of red axes from her dimensional storage. Ire thought about it and realized the suggestion made sense. So she activated her dimensional storage and pulled out a pair of giant axes known as Agnablade. These twin axes were forged from the wings of the demon god of fire and were even enchanted to spew flames. Meanwhile, Rimuru received a mail delivery from the postman. He opened it and realized it was from the Adventurers Guild, a recommendation letter granting him access to the lower levels of the school's library. Rimuru was excited. He immediately rushed to meet Ire at the training ground, asked her to stop training, and informed her they were heading to school right away. But before they left, Ire excitedly showed Rimuru her new weapon. Overcome with excitement, she decided to unleash the Mana Bestowal spell while wielding her axe. At that moment, something sparked in the axe, and a massive fire erupted, burning the surrounding grass and even the recommendation letter Rimuru had just received from the guild. At the same time, back in the elf village, a little girl was excited to taste giant bee honey for the first time, and she found it delicious. Her parents turned out to be the two elves from earlier, and they were also thrilled about the honey Rimuru had given them. They felt it was the best they'd ever had, and it would make quite a sale. Several hours later, Rimuru and Ire finally arrived at the Academy's library. To descend to the lower level, they needed to find someone from the library committee. Rimuru immediately remembered Ellie, so they decided to look for her. Within seconds, Ire was shocked to find Ellie lying on top of a bookshelf like some kind of maniac. When Ire asked why Ellie was always at the library, Ellie cheerfully explained that it was because she was a member of the library committee. Rimuru and Ire were of the opinion that Ellie always being at the library and missing classes would make her repeat a class. But Ellie assured them that she was fine since her family was awfully well connected. With that settled, Rimuru handed her the recommendation letter from the guild. Ellie opened it and noticed that part of it had been burned, but that didn't stop her from being stunned that Rimuru had received a recommendation so quickly. When she praised him for his hard work, Rimuru brushed it off, saying he was still far from achieving what he truly wanted. Curious, Ellie asked what that was, but Rimuru said it was too embarrassing to share and that he'd rather keep it a secret. The word secret triggered Ellie's imagination, and her thoughts immediately turned cultured. But Rimuru quickly clarified that it wasn't anything like what she was thinking. Still, Ellie remained convinced that whatever it was had to be indecent. She told him she would never approve of any indecent magic. Then she mentioned there was just one girl in the entire school, also a member of the library committee, who might be able to help. When Rimuru asked who it was, he was shocked to hear it was none other than Maria. He hadn't expected her to be part of the committee, but Maria explained that she had always worked hard so people would recognize her immense talent. That said, Maria asked Rimuru what he was after, and Rimuru informed her that his goal was to master healing magic. The moment Maria heard the words, healing magic, she was slightly traumatized, as she couldn't help but remember when Rimuru had healed her thighs back then. For clarification, Rimuru explained that the kind of healing magic he meant was the type that didn't require physical contact. At first, Maria immediately protested, but while doing so, she slipped off the book ladder and nearly fell. Rimuru caught her mid-air by her bouncy melons and immediately apologized. Maria eventually calmed down, accepted the apology, and led Rimuru to the part of the library where he could access the lower levels. Rimuru curiously asked how he was supposed to get to the lower floor since there were no stairs, to which Maria answered that he had to jump. Rimuru still didn't understand and asked what would happen if he failed to land properly from such a height. Maria then replied, assuring him that if he was too weak, he wouldn't be allowed to enter the lower floors anyway. Maria also warned that since the library had been focused on accumulating knowledge since ancient times, there was a serious problem with how it was organized, so Rimuru might find it hard to locate what he was looking for. Rimuru understood, so he and Ire made the dramatic jump to the lower level. Ire spread her dragon wings and almost missed the floor, so Rimuru had to catch her and pull her onto the first floor where he was. They immediately began searching for any material that could help with revival magic, but quickly realized the books were all jumbled together, so they decided to split up to cover more ground. During his search, Rimuru stumbled upon a book titled The Magic System Unique to Elves, which caught his interest. After searching for hours without finding any useful material, Ire complained of hunger. So, Rimuru suggested they continue the search the next day and head home. While heading back, Ire asked Rimuru if he'd found anything good during his search. Rimuru told her he hadn't found anything useful yet, but came across a book about the elven magic system, which he found interesting. A few hours later, Rimuru and Ire returned home, only to find a couple of elves waiting at his front door. Rimuru recognized one of the elves, Hamiya, and asked what the matter was. Before Hamiya could respond, the chief of Elven security stepped forward and declared that Rimuru was under arrest for conducting magic experiments near the Elven forest. Rimuru was shocked and began to wonder if his attempts to develop revival magic had been exposed. Following this, Rimuru wrote a letter to his family friend, Barnes, telling him about everything that had been going on in his life. He wrote about his enrollment into the academy and how he had bought a small house on the outskirts of the city. In the letter, Rimuru also revealed to Barnes that he had been captured by the elves under suspicion of conducting illegal magic experiments. While inside the cage on the way to the elven village, Rimuru was completely confused. He had no idea why the elves were arresting him. His revival magic research wasn't even close to the experimentation stage yet. He also noticed that Ire was trembling violently inside the prison carriage, so he moved over to check on her. That was when he realized that being transported in the dark carriage must have felt eerily similar to being inside a slaver's cage, bringing back painful memories of the time she'd spent locked away. Rimuru then placed a comforting hand on her shoulder and assured her that everything was going to be fine. Just then, the carriage came to a sudden stop, and someone ordered them to come out. It was Hamiya, who informed them they would have to continue the rest of the journey on foot. Rimuru demanded an explanation for his arrest, but Hamiya told him he'd have to wait a little longer and hear the details from the village elder. Rimuru reminded her that he had school the next day and wanted to return as soon as possible, but Hamiya apologized and told him that wouldn't be possible. Hearing this, Rimuru suspected the elves might be planning to hold them hostage for a while, so he immediately whispered to Ire, asking her to summon Eek. Ire obeyed. She pulled out the flute and blew into it. Soon, they arrived at the elven village and went straight to the village chief's crib. Inside, they met the village chief, an old man named Cashin, who looked like he could die at any moment. Cashin, cold and direct, got straight to the point and revealed the reason why Rimuru and his slave had been arrested. They were suspected of using dangerous magic to poison the giant bee honey. Rimuru was confused. He had no idea what the old frog was talking about. Before he could respond to the allegation, the rest of the elves began angrily shouting, accusing him of being responsible and telling him to stop feigning ignorance. Rimuru insisted he had no idea what they were talking about and reminded them that he had come peacefully of his own accord, believing they could talk things out calmly. But the elves coldly stated that peaceful discussion wasn't an option under these circumstances. Ire heard this and immediately pulled out her twin axe, but Rimuru quickly warned her not to start a fire like she had last time. He reminded her that if the surrounding forest caught fire, they'd be trapped as well. Old man Cashin didn't say a word, he simply watched the situation unfold with quiet intensity. Hamiya tried to calm things down, but before she could, Ire suddenly charged at Cashin mid-air. But Cashin immediately unleashed a defensive spell that stopped her in her tracks. Without hesitation, Cashin activated his own weapon sets of flying daggers that lunged straight at her. But Ire skillfully evaded every single one. Cashin saw this and commended her skill. Then, with a smug look, he reminded her that she was fighting a mage and then launched another set of daggers. Ire moved swiftly and dodged them all. But the old man wasn't about to let the youngin outshine him. He levitated his daggers again, this time lining them up directly above her. Ire was shocked. Before she could react, the daggers rained down. Before things could escalate further, Rimuru immediately ordered Ire to stand down. The old man laughed and boasted that there was no way a rookie like her could ever conquer the elves in their own village. He added that the only way Rimuru could free himself was by one option alone. He would have to investigate the incident and prove his innocence. If he could do that, the elves would reward him as if he were an adventurer they had hired. Furthermore, they would apologize for the mistaken arrest and grant him anything he wanted within reason. Rimuru considered the offer. After thinking it through, he said he'd like to make his request now. He asked if Cashin could teach him elven magic. Rimuru explained that he was a healer and had a deep interest in the elves' magical system. Cashin wasn't surprised, he had expected a request like that from a progeny of the Blanche lineage. He agreed to the condition but said that first, Rimuru would need to go to the meeting hall, where he would see those afflicted. Rimuru had no problem with that, and together with Ire, he followed Hamiya diligently to the hall. When they reached the entrance, Hamiya informed him that inside, they had gathered those suffering most severely from the symptoms of the poisonous honey. With that, they stepped inside and just like Hamiya had said, Rimuru saw a horrifying sight, sick elves lying across the floor. Rimuru immediately walked up to the elf in charge, introduced himself as a healer, and informed him that he had received the elder's permission to be there. He assured the instructor that he had some medical knowledge and might be able to help. The elf looked uneasy at Rimuru's confidence and pointed out that they already had their own healer and even their healer hadn't been able to do anything about the situation. Rimuru ignored the arrogant tone and asked why all the sick people had been gathered in one place. Rimuru questioned whether the disease wasn't contagious. However, the instructor replied that those were the instructions they had received from their healer. Just then, a brat named Maxwell saw Rimuru chatting with the elf and was instantly annoyed. Smugly, Maxwell told Rimuru that instead of standing around talking, he could at least make himself useful by drawing water or changing sheets. But the elf in charge quickly scolded Maxwell for being rude and apologized to Rimuru for his behavior. He explained that Maxwell was the grandson of the village chief, and ever since his best friend had fallen ill, he'd been on edge. Rimuru then noticed Maxwell kneeling beside a sick elf girl, trying to change her soiled sheet. He approached and asked if the girl was his friend. Maxwell responded like he had serious beef with Rimuru, angrily demanding to know what the heck he wanted. Rimuru calmly asked him to quiet down and gently placed his hand over the sick girl's head. A glowing magical circle appeared instantly, and mana flowed into her. As she exhaled deeply, Hamiya and the instructor assumed Rimuru had healed her. But Rimuru explained that he couldn't heal her completely, which only made Maxwell even more upset. Maxwell walked away, mocking Rimuru for being a healer who couldn't even fully heal his friend, but Rimuru chose to ignore him. As Maxwell stormed off, Rimuru noticed something odd: there were barely any children among the sick. That prompted him to ask the instructor whether the elves had only eaten the honey he'd given them, or if they'd also gone out to collect more on their own. The instructor confirmed that some had gathered honey themselves. Hearing this, Rimuru said he'd like to take a look at where the honey had been gathered. The instructor agreed but warned that Rimuru would need a guide if he was heading into the forest. Maxwell immediately popped out of nowhere and volunteered to guide them. The instructor objected, saying it was too dangerous for children. But Maxwell insisted that if the adults could venture into the forest, so could he. Rimuru reassured the instructor that they'd handled a few requests in the area as adventurers before, and that Ire could easily take care of any beasts they might encounter. The instructor was relieved to hear this, but still asked Rimuru to look after Maxwell. With that, Maxwell accompanied Rimuru and Ire into the forest. But along the way, Maxwell continued to trash-talk Rimuru, calling him a great healer who couldn't even fix everyone. Ire finally got fed up with the brat's mouth and was about to draw her weapon, but Rimuru cautioned her not to. Suddenly, midway through their walk, Rimuru sensed nearby monster activity. Maxwell immediately stepped forward and proudly declared that he could handle it himself. Rimuru tried to stop him, but the proud fool had already fired an arrow in the direction of the supposed threat. The arrow flew and struck something. It hit a black dragon dead on. Maxwell froze, clearly not expecting the monster to be a dragon. But just then, the dragon transformed into Ige, who had come in response to Ire's call. Meanwhile, back at school, Warak wasn't done plotting his evil, sinister plan. This time, he figured the elves might have caught on to everything he had been planning, so he was ready to change his tactics. At the same time, deep in the forest, Ige nearly fainted. She could sense a terrible stench. But Rimuru and the rest of the group couldn't smell anything. Rimuru asked her to pinpoint the exact location of the odor, but Ige said she could sense it everywhere. That made Rimuru pause. Maybe the reason they couldn't detect it was because the elven village was nestled in a deep valley. If they moved farther away from the village, they might be able to trace the source of the disgusting smell. The team planned to do just that, but Ige couldn't take the stench any longer. She collapsed to the ground and transformed into a little snake. Ire gently picked her up and wrapped her around her neck to carry her. After walking farther into the forest, they stumbled upon the Ragunia stone quarry. Ire remarked that she remembered Class C gathering Ragunia stones there as part of their orientation task. While she spoke, Rimuru spotted a hidden mine entrance and suggested they check it out. As they moved deeper into the mine, they reached a path that was blocked by giant stones. This made Rimuru curious as to why the path was blocked. He began to wonder whether it had been blocked naturally or on purpose. Not only that, but Ire mentioned that she could feel faint traces of mana behind the blocked path. Rimuru agreed with her observation and added that he could now also perceive the disgusting smell, which was proof that the source of the strange odor lay beyond the massive stones. Rimuru moved closer to the stones and pointed out that he could feel a faint heat and also hear the sound of running water coming from behind them. With curiosity building, Rimuru ordered Ire to move the heavy stones out of the way. Ire obeyed and started shifting them one by one. Suddenly, the whole place began to tremble. Before they knew it, a giant, ferocious mountain worm burst out of the opening Ire had made and started chasing the team. They ran as fast as they could, but suddenly, Rimuru and Maxwell stepped on unstable ground and fell straight through. They crashed deep into the mine, completely separated from Ire. Rimuru quickly noticed that Maxwell had injured his hand during the fall and offered to heal him, but Maxwell refused, insisting he'd just use medicinal herbs instead. Rimuru pointed out that there were no herbs anywhere in sight, leaving Maxwell no choice but to let him help. As Rimuru began the healing spell, he asked why Maxwell harbored so much hatred toward mages. Maxwell snapped that he didn't actually hate mages. What he hated was how everyone kept trying to force magic on him just because he was the village chief's grandson. He resented how people constantly told him he'd become a great mage someday. Rimuru tried to explain that it was only because they had high hopes for him, but that made Maxwell bristle even more. He yanked his hand away and growled that people only treated him that way because of his grandfather. No one seemed to care about what he wanted. No one noticed that his true strength lay in archery. He added that he was already as skilled with both bow and sword as any adult. Nevertheless, Rimuru calmly told him the reason he felt that way was because he had never really tried studying magic. Rimuru explained that if Maxwell chose to focus only on weapons and ignored magic, he might not be able to protect someone or something important to him. When the time came, Maxwell understood what Rimuru was trying to say, but he quickly brought them back to the present. They needed to find a way out of the mine. Just then, a loud rumble echoed behind them. The mountain worm had broken through another passage and was barreling toward them. In that same moment, they spotted Ire, also being chased by the massive creature. As the three of them ran, they noticed a bright light ahead. It had to be an exit. Rimuru quickly came up with a plan. He told Ire to throw him and Maxwell toward the light. Ire blinked in shock, asking how they were supposed to land safely. But Rimuru reassured her he had it covered. He instructed her that once she tossed them, she should use Excel Boost to escape the monster. Without wasting time, Ire hurled Rimuru and Maxwell toward the light with all her strength. As they reached the opening, they burst out of the mine and found themselves plummeting toward a massive, fast-flowing stream. To ensure a safe landing, Rimuru told Maxwell he would keep casting healing magic on both of them throughout the fall, but warned him to land on his feet. Just as promised, Rimuru used healing spells mid-fall, and the two of them hit the water with minimal injuries. But before they could catch their breath, the mountain worm exploded out of the mine entrance, still chasing Ire. Rimuru saw this and immediately shouted to Ire that the weak spot of any mountain worm was the very center of its body. That was all Ire needed to hear. She unleashed her Agni twin blade and, still in free fall, maneuvered herself toward the center of the worm's massive body and slashed it right at its core. The monster let out a deafening screech before collapsing in defeat. With the monster defeated, Ire descended to the ground and asked Rimuru if he was alright. Seeing that he was, she smiled and said she was glad he was safe. However, Rimuru noticed that Ire had sustained a few injuries, so he immediately healed her. A few minutes later, Hamiya and some elves rushed over to meet Rimuru and the team. But suddenly, Rimuru began to feel dizzy from using too much healing magic. So Hamiya quickly suggested they carry him to the guest house right away. By twilight, Rimuru was feeling much better. To help with his full recovery, Hamiya offered Rimuru and Ire some fruit juice and cookies prepared in the elven village. She also mentioned that Maxwell was outside, excitedly recounting the entire adventure to anyone who'd listen. After that, Ire complained that she was feeling a little drunk. This made Rimuru start to suspect that it might be caused by the strange-smelling fluid from the Ragunia mine. He suggested she stay at the guest house and get some rest. With that settled, Rimuru called for Hamiya's attention, saying he needed to discuss something very important with her. When they were alone, Rimuru leaned in and whispered to Hamiya that he had a strange hypothesis and desperately needed to investigate the underground river. He further explained that if his theory turned out to be correct, they would need to act fast. Some time later, when Ire was much better, Rimuru showed her a Ragunia stone crystal and explained that he had taken the water flowing into the village and distilled it. He pointed out that this was decisive proof of the presence of Ragunia stone ore in the underground river. The elves overheard Rimuru saying this to Ire and became intrigued. They asked if that was the reason everyone had collapsed. Rimuru confirmed it and went on to explain that the stone itself was poisonous. He firmly stated his hypothesis. The villagers had fallen ill due to water and air pollution caused by the Ragunia stone. Rimuru added that he suspected someone had deliberately charged the Ragunia stone ore with harmful mana and intentionally placed it in contact with the underground river. But the elves still found something puzzling. One elf girl pointed out that everyone in the village had drunk the contaminated water, yet not all had fallen ill. Rimuru nodded and explained that he believed only a trace amount of Ragunia stone was present in the water. Because of this, the effects would take time to build up before more villagers began showing symptoms. This was shocking news for the elves. Another elf, a long-haired man, asked who could have done something so cruel. He noted that charging the Ragunia stone and placing it near the river source must have taken considerable effort. Rimuru admitted he had no idea who was responsible, but he did have a solution. He explained that they first needed to locate where the Ragunia stone and the river met, and then separate them. This was the only way to eliminate the pollution. At that moment, Old Man Cashin, who had been eavesdropping the entire time, entered and told Rimuru that he was just like Marielle Blanche, who had also been a passionate researcher. When Rimuru curiously asked who this Marielle Blanche was, Cashin revealed that she was one of his ancestors who had visited the elven village some 500 years ago. Rimuru's interest spiked. He asked Cashin what kind of magic his ancestor had researched. But the old scummy man replied that he would only answer once Rimuru had solved the problem at hand, frustrating Rimuru to no end. Early the next morning, Rimuru, his team, and a couple of elves set out to locate the point where the Ragunia stone and the river were in contact, aiming to separate them. After walking quite a distance, Ire suddenly alerted Rimuru that she could sense some kind of magic trap nearby. Rimuru immediately suspected it might be another teleportation spell, so he quickly decided to go over the plan again with the team. He reminded them that their primary goal was to remove the stone ore in contact with the underground water, emphasizing the urgency of the situation. He added that evacuations would begin at the starting point once they were in position. After prepping the team, Rimuru moved over to Ire in secret and whispered that once they got hold of the stone, she should discreetly store it in her dimensional storage because they might be able to sell it later. With that said, Rimuru turned back to the elves and asked if they were ready to fight their way through any obstacles. The elves were fired up and ready. The elf leading the group stepped forward and informed Rimuru that they were familiar with every magic beast in the area and requested permission to take charge of the operation. Meanwhile, up on a distant mountain, Warak watched everything unfold, visibly angry that the elves hadn't stayed holed up in their little village. Instead, they had chosen to interfere with his plans. Enraged, he decided to teach them a lesson. He summoned a black, gooey monster and then hid himself inside it. At that moment, Rimuru informed the group that he was beginning to sense an overwhelming mana presence. But before anyone could react, various types of monsters erupted from the ground and began attacking them. The elves instantly fell into battle formations and spread out. Some fired arrows at the monsters, while others attacked with their swords. Ire wasn't left behind. She lunged at the creatures at full speed. But then she noticed that the black gooey monster was heading straight for Rimuru. Before she could alert him, an elf girl jumped in to protect him, but was stabbed in the gut by the creature. Rimuru rushed over to heal her. But as he worked, he was shocked to see several other elves also being stabbed by the same monster. Desperate, Rimuru concluded that someone had to be controlling the creature from within. He immediately shouted to the team, instructing them to search for the body behind the monstrous attack. Responding quickly, Ire used her dragon-enhanced vision to scan the area. Spotting a suspicious location, she rushed up the mountain and sliced at a large stone. That was when she saw it, a black, gooey body with eyes all over. She wasted no time striking at the monster in an attempt to reveal who was inside. But unfortunately, her attack wasn't strong enough to cut through the beast. Rimuru had a gut feeling the caster was indeed inside that mass of sludge, but he found it strange and troubling that even Ire couldn't break through it. With more elves being wounded, the elven leader quickly ordered the remaining fighters to watch for the tusks emerging from the gooey monster. He warned them not to charge unless they could see the tusks, and urged everyone to stay close to Rimuru so he could heal them if needed. But just as he finished speaking, Rimuru noticed the monster was targeting those furthest from him. It was a clear sign that whoever was controlling the creature was highly experienced in fighting against coordinated groups. The elven leader also realized the monster was deliberately luring him away from Rimuru. Just as he considered moving back, he was viciously stabbed. Rimuru saw him fall and rushed over, determined to heal him. As he arrived and summoned magical circles, Ire suddenly shouted a warning. Rimuru wasn't fast enough to react, but at the last second, Hamiya swooped in and pushed him out of harm's way, taking the stab to the chest herself. The sight enraged Ire. She launched a furious assault on the beast, slashing at it with unrestrained fury. Meanwhile, Rimuru rushed to Hamiya's side and began healing her, panicked but focused. While doing so, he realized they couldn't keep fighting like this. Too many were getting hurt, and they might not hold out much longer. Just then, the injured elf leader, barely able to stand, placed a hand on Rimuru's shoulder and reassured him. He said they were willing to sacrifice their lives for the safety of their village. But Rimuru turned to him and declared he wouldn't let that happen. He promised to heal not just him, but every elf still standing. Right after saying this, Rimuru noticed something strange. The ground beneath him felt muddy. He knelt down and realized the muddiness was due to Ragunia fluid, meaning the underground river had to be directly below them. Excited by this discovery, Rimuru's determination surged. He called out to Ire, announcing that what he was about to do could change everything. Then, with focused intensity, Rimuru summoned a multitude of magical circles. A brilliant light began to glow in the sky. From a distance, Maxwell looked up. Stunned, Rimuru was unleashing the ultimate healing spell, the deployment healing spell. At that moment, there was an outpouring of mana from the sky, causing Ire to feel an intense surge of energy coursing through her body. She immediately charged at the monster at a blurry speed. This time, she was able to slice off a part of the round, gooey monster and revealed Warak's face for everyone to see. Everyone was shocked to see that the mastermind behind those monsters was none other than Teacher Warak. With his cover now blown, Warak was furious. He was sick and tired of the nonsense and swore he would never let Ire get away with what she had done. To do that, Warak stopped his multiple slimy hands from attacking in all directions and focused all his strikes on Ire. Ire started to struggle. Her attacks could no longer slice through the thick slime. Maxwell noticed this and decided to help by distracting Warak to give Ire an opening. Knowing he stood no chance of landing the perfect shot with normal arrows, Maxwell took one arrow from his quiver, infused it with mana, and fired it at Warrack. The arrow came close, but Warrack blocked it with a wall of slime. That was exactly the distraction Maxwell had hoped for. Caught off guard, Warrack left an opening. Ire seized it. With a swift aerial strike, she descended with her blade. Warrack's eyes widened in shock. He hadn't seen it coming, and by the time he realized, it was already too late. Ire's attack connected, triggering a massive explosion. Warrack's magic vanished, and then he completely disappeared into thin air, as if he had never existed. As the dust settled, Maxwell was proud of himself and overly excited that they had won. But just then, Rimuru collapsed to the ground, drained from exhaustion. When he regained consciousness hours later, Rimuru found Ire standing over him completely naked, her flat chest exposed. Startled, he immediately asked why she wasn't wearing anything. But when he looked around, he realized almost everyone nearby was stark naked as well. Two unclad elven hotties approached him, smiling warmly as they thanked him for everything he had done for the elven people. They explained that after the monsters were defeated, the villagers had rushed over the moment they heard the battle was over. Not only that, but once the Ragunya stones were removed from the underground water, they discovered the river also contained a natural hot spring. So, for now, everyone had decided to relax and enjoy it. Looking around, Rimuru noticed that even Ig, their supporting dragon, was lazily soaking in the spring, clearly enjoying a relaxing time in the spring. Ire suggested they join in too, and Rimuru agreed. As he eased into the warm water, he spotted old man Kashan peacefully meditating nearby. Kashan noticed Rimuru watching him and commented on how hard he had pushed himself that day. Rimuru chuckled and replied that he might have been better prepared if Kashan had told him more about the formidable enemy he was facing. Hearing this, Kashan raised an eyebrow and asked what he meant. Rimuru explained that he knew Kashan had a drug analysis skill and had always known the honey had been harmless all along. Kashan froze for a moment, visibly surprised. Then he sighed, admitting he had never realized Rimuru possessed such a terrifying gift that allowed him to see the abilities of others. Now that he'd been found out, Kashan had no choice but to be honest. He confessed that he had long suspected Warrack was up to something in the woods. But because Warrack was a noble, taking action without proof could have sparked a political conflict between the nobles and the elves. As village chief, he had tried to protect his people by resolving the matter as discreetly and cautiously as possible. That said, Kashan thanked Rimuru sincerely and told him he had also prepared a reward. Furthermore, he said Rimuru was welcome to visit the village again anytime. Rimuru replied that he was particularly interested in hearing more about Mariel Blanche. Days later, Rimuru and Ire were finally ready to leave the elven village. Apparently, Rimuru had been given all of his ancestor Mariel Blanche's research materials. He asked Hamia if it was really okay for them to hand over everything. But Hamia explained that Mariel had already instructed the chief to throw the materials away, saying she no longer needed them. Hamia said it was far more fitting to pass the research on to her descendant than to simply discard it. Just as Rimuru and Ire departed, Ig, who had been lounging in the hot spring the entire time, suddenly burst into Kashan's home, asking for them. But Kashan informed her they had already left. Kashan then paused and noticed something about Ig. He told her she bore a striking resemblance to the god of destruction. Ig told him he was right, and then revealed that the last time she came to the elven village, she hadn't been using transformation magic. Following that, Kashan told her she had come at the right time, and then handed her a worn book to give to Rimuru. When Ig asked what the book was, Kashan explained that it was one of Mariel's notebooks, hidden deep inside the shelf. Ig carefully stared at the cover of the book and suddenly remembered it. She told Kashan it was reckless of Mariel to have left that book behind. Kashan became curious and asked if it contained some kind of dangerous magic research. Ig said the notebook belonged to Mariel and her lord, the god of destruction, and that it contained the research they had done together on revival magic. Meanwhile, elsewhere, the heir to the Marquis, Franz, was furious about Wakari's death. Apparently, he and Wakari had been working together on a secretive plan. While he was busy throwing a fit, his father, the Marquis, walked into the office and told him he was to blame for adding Wakari to his ranks just because Wakari was a professor at the academy. A useless professor who couldn't even beat his own students. However, the Marquis gently placed a hand on Franz's head and encouraged him to learn from his mistake instead of beating himself up. Then, more firmly, he declared that he would never forgive the brats who had murdered Wakari and dared to mess with his plans. Meanwhile, back at Rimuru's crib, he was devastated and complained about being broke to the rest of the adventurers. When Amy asked if he didn't make enough Benjamins being an adventurer, Rimuru told her that the vast majority of the money went into paying his school tuition and the rent for his shack. To make matters worse, Aya revealed that the reason Rimuru was down was because he couldn't afford to pay for the school's upcoming field trip. To solve the money issue, Rimuru brought up an idea. He suggested that the team plan a week-long expedition during spring break to earn some cool cash. But Kelvin raised a concern about the plan. He told Rimuru that the team had never taken on such a long request before. To that, Rimuru said that was exactly why they would first start by taking smaller requests to make sure they had a strong team bond. So, throughout that week, the team took several requests that involved hunting monsters. Rimuru was pleased with how the team was performing. He told Amy that even though they hadn't worked together before, their teamwork as a group was pretty solid. Amy agreed and said he was right. She added that it was thanks to Rimuru's extraordinary healing magic and the fact that they had an excellent vanguard. Rimuru returned the praise, saying her fire magic was way better than that of a typical mid-ranked adventurer. But while the team struggled to take down a few monsters, Aya was sitting proudly atop a pile of monsters she had annihilated on her own like a gigachad. This made the others feel like they weren't doing enough, but Rimuru encouraged them, saying they should be happy they were getting stronger. Later that evening, back at home, Rimuru received Marielle Blanche's notes on revival magic. He was excited and told Aya that before they went on another quest, he wanted to decipher the contents of the book. Aya raised an eyebrow and asked why he said decipher, like the book was written in code. Rimuru explained that he used the word because Marielle Blanche's handwriting looked like that of a toddler, and the book also contained some characters he had never seen in his life. Aya took a look and revealed that the characters were the language of the gods. Rimuru was surprised and asked if she could read it. Aya said she couldn't, but she could recognize the markings because her twin Agnablades had similar inscriptions. She also mentioned that she had many books in her treasure vault written in the same divine language. This revelation led Rimuru to suspect that the notes might not have been written by Marielle after all, but by the god of destruction himself. Yuyuri, the god of destruction from the past, was known as an inventor who crafted many original spells and magical tools. He had earned the title God of Destruction after he destroyed the World Tree 500 years ago. Rimuru couldn't help but wonder what kind of god this mysterious figure had truly been. Just then, while flipping through the book, Aya called Rimuru's attention to two pages that had been stuck together. Rimuru moved to help her unstick the pages, but suddenly, his expression darkened when he saw something hidden between them. It triggered memories from his past. He remembered the first time he had learned to use healing magic. As he stared at the carefully drawn magical circles on the pages, it hit him they were the same ones used in the very first healing spell he had ever learned. Meanwhile, somewhere on the street, Eeg summoned multiple magical circles to impress some kids. The kids were clearly amazed and told her she was incredible. But suddenly, they ran off when their mother's voice rang out, announcing that dinner was ready. With the kids gone, Eeg was left alone again. A wave of loneliness washed over her, and she started missing Rimuru and Aya, who she assumed were off in the city enjoying their best lives. Suddenly, a female voice from the shadows caught her attention. The voice called Eeg, the dragon left in charge of Merba, and asked what she was doing there. The moment Eeg heard the voice, she began sweating profusely and blushing at the same time. The voice belonged to none other than the god of destruction, Yuyuri, who had taken the form of a Barbie doll. Before long, Amy happily flashed a paper, announcing to the team that she had found a request that fit all of the team's requirements. Rimuru was excited to hear this. He checked out the mission on the paper and discovered that the job description was to hunt down a bone wolf. Very early the next morning, the team began their journey to the mission's location. While on the way, Rimuru had a momentary flashback to a few days ago in the library. He recalled how Ellie had been stunned when he asked her if she knew anything about the language of the gods. However, Ellie apologized for being useless and told Rimuru that she couldn't read the language. While they were talking, some random chick named Sarah interrupted their conversation, asking if they were talking about something fun. Before anyone could even respond, the nosy girl immediately pried into Marielle Blanche's notes and muttered in disbelief that the notes were written in the language of the gods. When Rimuru excitedly asked her if she could read it, Sarah responded that she couldn't, but then she asked if the letters in the book weren't the letters of the awful god who broke the World Tree. At that, Ellie informed Rimuru that Sarah was an archbishop of the World Tree faith. After that, Sarah moved uncomfortably close to Rimuru and asked what evil deed he was up to that would warrant him researching the language of the gods. Of course, Rimuru wasn't going to tell her his real purpose, so he lied, saying that he was looking for materials on magic, but half of the stuff was written in the language of the gods. With that, Sarah took a closer look at the front page of the book and read out the first line. She said it stated that all who live in the world would return to the tree. Rimuru heard those words and began to think deeply. He started to wonder why the god of destruction would write that on the very first page of a book about revival magic. At the moment, Rimuru could only use 3 healing spells. Among those 3, the one that used magical circles consumed the most mana. Rimuru began to wonder whether using magic circles had originally been part of a resurrection spell. But then, his family had been using magical circles for healing for generations, and still, there had never been a record of anyone being revived from the dead. Did that mean they encountered a problem that made resurrection impossible? Or did they alter and repurpose the magic circle into a healing spell? These were the questions running through Rimuru's mind. Back in the present, Rimuru snapped out of his thoughts and asked Kevin how much farther they had to go to reach the mission location. Kevin replied that they should be there soon now that they were out of the forest. It was just a bit farther. They started moving along a narrow path with forest on each side. But something felt off. Rimuru noticed they hadn't seen a single soul, not even any farm workers. Suddenly, Ira announced that she could sense monsters. The entire team was immediately on alert, and as they looked ahead, they spotted a creature that looked like a skeletal dragon battling 2 weak-looking men. Recognizing that the creature must be the bone wolf they were sent to eliminate, Ira quickly declared that she would lead the attack and immediately dashed toward the monster. The 2 men spotted Ira charging in their direction and were immediately irritated at the sight of a child. They shouted at her, telling her to stay away and just run, but to their utter shock, Ira took down the bone wolf with a single strike from her Agnablade. Seeing how strong she was, they quickly informed her that there were even stronger bone wolves on the opposite side of the village. Kevin, who had just arrived, told the men that they were adventurers sent by the guild and asked what the situation was. One of the men explained that monsters had suddenly started attacking the north gate of the village. He also informed Kevin that the rest of the villagers had been evacuated to the meeting hall. Rimuru immediately ordered Ire to go after the monsters at the gate, since she was the fastest. Bone wolves were undead souls that hadn't passed on after death. That was the ideal explanation. But since every dead soul was supposed to return to the world tree and be reborn, Rimuru couldn't help but wonder why the undead bone wolves didn't fit into that theory of reincarnation. Just then, Ire jumped over the fence at the village's north gate, and just as the men had said, 2 monstrous bone wolves were already waiting for her. But Ire didn't waste even a second. She took them down with a blast of powerful electricity. While she was fighting, Rimuru helped heal the wounds of the injured villagers. After the team was done, Rimuru suggested they ask some of the villagers for more details about what was going on. Amy then brought over a random man and introduced him to Rimuru as the village elder, the one who had submitted the request. Rimuru asked the elder to explain the details of the job. The elder explained that the nightmare began about a month ago, when an enormous human figure was spotted near the ravine at the edge of the village. At first, everyone thought they must have been seeing things, but just 5 days later, the undead wolves suddenly began attacking the village. As Rimuru listened to everything the old man had to say, he couldn't help but think. The undead were a rare sight, which made him wonder what the heck they were doing in the village in the first place. Undead typically showed up after large battles, appearing in the aftermath of bloodshed, so that made Rimuru wonder if some kind of conflict had taken place in or near the village. With that in mind, he asked Ire if she could sense anything from deep within the valley. Ire paused for a moment, then closed her eyes. After a few seconds, she told Rimuru that she could sense a faint trace of mana in the valley, probably from a magic beast. Still, Rimuru believed they needed to check out the valley to be sure. But since everyone was exhausted from the fight, he suggested they rest for the day and set out the next morning. Little did Rimuru and his crew know, something deadly was already stirring deep within the valley. The next day, deep in the valley near the border of the city of Raum, Rimuru was shocked to see the wreckage of a destroyed carriage. He wondered if the bridge in the valley might have collapsed, but Kevin believed the carriage must have fallen recently. Rimuru suddenly noticed coins scattered all over the ground. He saw that the gold coins had their faces scratched off, leading him to conclude that they were from the city of Raum. When Kevin asked how he could tell the coins belonged to Raum, Rimuru explained that Raum coins were a little sturdier than most. He noted that the coins were almost in perfect condition even after the accident. This led Rimuru to believe that the owner of the carriage must have been a trader who had likely conducted business in Realm. Most likely, the trader was a high-ranking noble, as only someone very wealthy would carry such a large amount of gold coins. But something didn't add up. Rimuru couldn't understand why the trader had chosen to take such an obscure route, one so hidden that even the locals didn't know about it, especially while transporting so much gold. Suddenly, the ground beneath them began to shake, making Rimuru wonder what was going on. Before he could figure it out, strange hands started bursting out of the ground like a scene straight out of Evil Dead. Just then, the team was attacked by the undead. Kevin wasted no time slashing through them, but he grew frustrated when he realized that no matter how many body parts he sliced through, the undead just kept advancing. He also noticed a few smaller ones among them and began to feel uneasy about attacking. When the team noticed that Ire hadn't been doing much fighting, Kevin asked where she was. Ire was just standing still, completely frozen. She couldn't move a single muscle. The sight of one of the undead, bound in chains and dressed like a slave, triggered memories of her own past. She remembered all the terrible, horrible things she had endured as a slave. Rimuru noticed that Ire was completely lost in thought and shouted to snap her back to the moment, but she still didn't move. So he quickly grabbed her by the hand and led her away to a more secluded area, away from the battle with the undead. Once there, he kept trying to snap her back to consciousness, but Ire was deeply trapped in her thoughts. He tried shaking her, but her awareness remained lost. The situation was bizarre. Rimuru remembered that Ire had once fallen into this kind of state before, back when they were riding in a carriage. He also recalled seeing one of the undead earlier wearing a slave collar, and began to wonder if Ire had been enslaved around the same time as that girl. Maybe that was what triggered her current state of mind. One last time, Rimuru slapped both of her cheeks and shouted for her to wake up, but still, nothing. That's when Rimuru realized yelling wasn't going to help. Meanwhile, Kevin was still struggling with the undead, shouting and demanding to know what was going on with their starfighter. But Rimuru kept begging him to focus on the undead and just give him more time. At that moment, Rimuru remembered that the Blanche family had a healing spell designed to pacify the mind, but the problem with that spell was that it took time to cast. Nevertheless, Rimuru pinned Ire to the wall and then hugged her. While doing so, he asked her to trust him with her body. Instantly, a blinding light began to radiate from their bodies. But suddenly, a massive giant monster burst out from the ground and started charging at the team. They immediately recognized it as the giant the village head must have been talking about. Kevin saw the monster and was struck with fear. He asked if they were going to run away, as it was clear that just he and Amy wouldn't be able to handle it alone. Rimuru heard his concern, which made him realize they wouldn't be able to hold out much longer. With no time to spare, Rimuru quickly told Ire that he would use his secret technique. Without warning, he kissed her briefly, then recoiled in embarrassment and explained that connecting mouth to mouth was the fastest way to activate the healing technique. After the awkward kiss, Ire finally regained consciousness, though she couldn't shake the taste of Rimuru's lips from her mouth. Just as Amy complained about running out of mana, the monster closed in and was about to crush the team. But at the last moment, Rimuru charged at the beast with her twin Agna blades in hand. When they collided, a massive explosion occurred, but Ire stood victorious against the beast, emerging from the blast unscathed. Meanwhile, watching the entire battle unfold from a distance were Eeg and Yuyuri. Yuyuri was thrilled to witness such an incredible fight, especially seeing Rimuru and Ire in action. With the battle concluded, Kevin told Rimuru that with the mission complete, they would be promoted as adventurers and would earn some cash from the sale of the giant monster's bones. Kevin also added that Rimuru's promotion meant he would now have a free pass to the bottom level of the library. Rimuru heard this, but remained silent, his thoughts focused on the undead. He planned to investigate them further at the Magic Academy's library. He couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that the existence of those creatures was somehow connected to revival magic. Meanwhile, at the residence of the Marquis, some form of ritual was underway as a slave was being dragged and tortured. The evil Marquis watched from behind a wall, his two sons beside him. The younger son asked if everything was ready, but their father remained in deep silence. A man with a mallet cruelly nailed the head of the slave, while the Marquis looked on in contentment. With that done, the Marquis turned to his eldest son and asked if he had taken care of the slave traders. The eldest son replied, assuring him that everything had been handled. The Marquis commended him for a job well done and instructed him to ensure the rest of the operation went smoothly. He added that if all went according to plan, soon all of Realm would be theirs. Meanwhile, at the library, Ellie was amazed that Rimuru had been granted access to the deepest part of the archives. She said it was a new record for the youngest student at the Realm Magic Academy. She whipped out the authorization card that granted Rimuru permission to enter the restricted section. But before handing it over, she told Rimuru that he and Ire were special to have found a way to maneuver through the administrative procedures, which had been progressing for quite some time. She also expressed surprise at how quickly the Adventurers Guild had processed the paperwork, and how much Rimuru had managed to earn the guild's trust. Rimuru was touched, and said it had all been thanks to Kelvin acting as a mediator and Ire's efforts. That said, Rimuru added that it was time he got started on some research, so Ellie handed him the authorization card. She also informed him that the deepest part of the library was roughly categorized, making it easier to find things down there. Rimuru thanked her and told her she had been helpful. However, before they left, Ellie informed Rimuru that it actually took 5 seconds to fall to the deepest level. Rimuru, curious, asked what would happen if they didn't land on the desired floor. Ellie replied that if that happened, a teleportation spell would activate and return them to their original location. Rimuru understood, and with that, he and Ire immediately jumped to the lowest level. They successfully landed in the deepest part of the library and began searching for books. Ire asked Rimuru if their search was still focused on resurrection spells, but Rimuru said no, he was now thinking of researching the undead first. A few seconds in, Rimuru suddenly found a book that caught his interest. While reading, he told Ire he had a theory. The recent disturbance with the undead that occurred in the village might have happened because there were already bodies buried there. Ire was surprised and asked what he meant by that. Rimuru explained that, according to the teachings of the World Tree, there was a reincarnation system that allowed it to collect and reincarnate the souls of the dead. Souls that weren't given a proper send-off could sometimes slip through the system. Rimuru added that, based on what he read in the book, souls that the World Tree couldn't collect could reattach to their bodies and become undead. Ire listened attentively but was a bit confused. She asked, if a dead soul reattached to its body and became a zombie, how was that different from resurrection? Rimuru answered that it was a simple question. He explained that resurrection was a technique that brought a body back to life without any decay. While for zombies, even if the soul returns to the body, the decay doesn't stop. Meanwhile, back at the library entrance, Ellie, now joined by Sarah, suddenly sensed a strange energy entering the building. A sinister, evil wind blew past them, sending chills down their spines. Sarah immediately noticed the incoming danger and stepped protectively in front of Ellie, urging her to stay close. Just then, a mysterious, sinister figure dressed in a black jacket and hoodie casually strolled into the library. Reacting quickly, Sarah summoned a magical circle and demanded to know who the heck he was. But to her shock, the circle in her hand vanished, nullified by some unknown counterforce. Before Sarah could figure out what was happening, the stranger moved like the wind and struck her on the head. In a flash, he grabbed Ellie by the neck, lifted her into the air, and hurled her into the open void leading to the lowest part of the library. As Ellie plummeted rapidly toward the hard floor below, Sarah screamed in horror, calling out for anyone down there to catch her. But it was too late. In mere seconds, Ellie married the floor. Sarah stared in horror at the crumpled body of her friend, her own body trembling uncontrollably with fear and disbelief. But before she could process the nightmare unfolding before her, the dark stranger seized her hand and coldly informed her that she too was destined to fall to her death thanks to the teleportation system of the void, which his powers had just nullified. Without wasting another word, he grinned and told Sarah to enjoy her 5-second fall before tossing her into the void as well. Fortunately, Ire caught Sarah just in time, saving her from the fatal impact. The evil stranger, surprised, asked how she was able to use magic. Ire turned to him with a chilling glare, eyes like death, and shoved her dragon hand into his mouth. She followed it up with a brutal punch to the jaw before stating coldly that she wasn't using magic, she was using a dragon arm with wings. The man fell to the ground, wounded and begging for mercy. He confessed that he had been hired by someone and promised to reveal his employer if Ire spared him. Ire, without flinching, assured him that she kept her promises. Trusting her words, the man revealed that his employer was none other than the Marquis of Rittenberg. At the same time, while this was going on, Sarah finally landed on the bottom level of the library and rushed toward Ellie. But as she approached, she saw that Rimuru was already by her side. Desperately, Sarah begged Rimuru to use his powers to heal Ellie. But Rimuru, with sorrow in his eyes, told her that he couldn't bring the dead back to life. However, he added grimly, there was only one way to do that if she was prepared to betray the world. Will Rimuru be able to resurrect Ellie? Comment, the noble and his dragon girl, if you're eager to find out in our part 3. Give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more content like this. As always, thanks for watching.